have minutes or anything from
We'll
last time.
call the special meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Advisory Board to order. I would like to do a roll call. I'm Michael O'Neill, appointed member and chair of the board.
April Sparks, admin for the department.
Riley Hanson, member of the board.
Stephen Mayfield, board member.
Oh.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Sarah Shepherd, board member.
Ann Shed, city hall. Ellie Ray, city planner.
All right. Thanks everybody for jumping at this chance to come back together so that we can finish our work and give a good clean slate of recommendations on the guidelines to the city commission and to city staff. Next, our regular item is the discussion program guidelines update. Start where we left off at our last meeting, and that I think was around page 7.
Yeah, page 7, section 10, I remember.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on that. Okay. All right. So this is an area where we've got to punch.
Oh, here, there's also, there's
Yes.
happens to all of us, at least it's not, something
Yeah. Anyway. So we will start with section 10, multifamily rental housing. So we'll start with the title. One good with the cross, the way that's been presented. I think that's consistent with our discussions last go round. So that would seem the next edits seem to be consistent with that. Multifamily rental housing projects include acquisition, new construction, demolition, and reconstruction, conversion, or rehabilitation of housing that will be occupied by eligible beneficiaries. And then we got rid of all the other language. Are we good with that edit? Any concerns about dropping the last section? No. Okay, we're all good. Nice. Anything from staff on concern about that? No. Okay. Projects that result in, so we'll jump down to section A, rent limits. With the multifamily rental housing is governed by rent limits established by the product primary funding source. Okay. Clear in the absence of that, that will fall back to the rent limits of these reference programs. Next, any changes there? Any concern with that section? No.
Nope.
Okay.
Stays consistent with us removing direct mention of transitional and non-permanent housing in the document.
Yeah. Very good. Then financing structure and requirements. Funds may be granted short-term construction loans and or fixed-term financing not to exceed 18 years. So,
Chair, if I may.
Yep.
We just want you to know there was some, even though it's used, I think, in the field, there was concern about how the language talked about permanent loans and permanent financing, and then later in a sentence it would say permanent not to exceed 18 years.
okay.
To make it very clear, we started calling that like 18-year, here's the requirements, instead of making it seem like permanent is like actually permanent forever. Just to make it really clear for the commission and for applicants that we're talking 18 years or less. I think that was
finances or NeighborWorks recommendation?
Was either NeighborWorks or Finance that just recommended like, still have it, don't make it less than 15 years.
Okay.
But really the intent is for it just to be a name change, so if you see something in the that looks like a policy change, will you please call it out, because the intent was just a name change.
And the 18 years is meant to dovetail with, the tax credit. So
Yeah.
15 years and then a look back period, that's fairly common structure.
And that 18 years is pulled from the next page, we just added it, the extra part in here to re-clarify what's stated on the next page.
One question I have is in terms of the, fixed term. Now, does fixed mean that it'll be, interest bearing, paying both principal and interest?
The intent is that we will not have interest only, but there was some discussion, I think, right before you all lost your quorum of members, I think. So that would have been like last March or something, where there was the discussion that maybe construction loans be allowed to have interest only, but that the long-term permanent 18-year or whatever we were calling it at the time would no longer allow interest only. Right now on $1 million, the fund is getting $816.67 back a month because they're on interest only.
Right.
There was concern that it might hinder future projects.
And that's,
But then also like, we're not gonna be changing the interest rate in the middle of 18 years. It's not gonna be a variable interest
Okay.
loan, right?
so
Unless you all
the
think
question
that's
is,
appropriate.
the fixed term does not reflect on the terms of a construction loan, so a construction loan could still be interest only. Do we need a comma after loan there? And or
Well, there's the short-term construction.
loans, and in that is it understood that interest only could be part of that construction loan?
I think we put, Chair, I think that got pulled out separately as the actual loan terms. This is just saying an applicant could come in for only a construction loan, or maybe they don't need
Or
a
a fixed
construction
term
loan
finance.
and they could do fixed finance, and they could do the 18 years. But if they needed to do both,
They
they're
could,
also
okay.
eligible for that. I believe we put it in the actual loan terms, what's allowed.
Am I understanding what you're trying to say, that maybe we need to, after the word financing in that first sentence, say, comma, the latter not to exceed 18 years, is that what you're trying?
No, after the short-term construction loans and or fixed term, I guess, but the construction loans are not fixed term. It's just
Well,
construction
they're
loans, so
for a year.
they're not to exceed 3 years, but it could be interest only, while the other is
I think the way it is written conveys the meaning in terms of, like we later define in the very next section, the difference between a construction loan and a fixed loan.
okay.
We were concerned about, I guess, to Ellie's point, the not to exceed 18 years applying to both of them, but maybe we put a comma after construction loan, but at the same time, the not to exceed 18 years is actually defined later in a fixed loan.
Okay,
So
so
it's
it's
a loan, so maybe even we strike the not to exceed 18 years to avoid that confusion, because it is defined later in the next section.
yeah. But, okay, no, I see it. I think the added part at the end makes it clear. I guess my question is the construction loan is made clear that interest only and other flexible financing structures would be entertained for a construction loan, but on a fixed term financing
I think we
Would
get
be
into
a
that in
set-
the green
okay.
section,
in the green section.
And, you know, if
and whether we need to put it
Put
up
it
there or
up there,
not would
okay.
be a recommendation, but I believe it's outlined in the green.
All right, so and then the red added, I think does help, not to exceed 20,000 per housing unit developed. The only comment I have on that is whether or not there should be some is it meant that this will be adjusted periodically or, cause if you put in 20,000, which will work now, but like in 5 years, 6 months. Yes, you know.
You know.
No, but I mean, will it be, a different kind? I think for now, this summer when we have 20,000, that's a good number, but it could be looked at later, like in 10 years, or it could look like not a lot.
Usually with policy guidelines and even our adopted codes, it's probably having to more often than care to, they're living, breathing things, so yeah, it can be
There's a
adjusted.
chance, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think the point, Chair, right now of adding that in was so that entities were not encouraged to come in and say, we want $1 million for five.
but, right. Yeah, no, I think
Right,
that's exactly.
Hearing
we
what
want to
the
do here.
board has said about getting the most positive impacts from the funds or the, biggest return on investment. We were hearing those comments, and just FYI, we got questions about where the 20,000 came from. It's because it's just the rounded up version of what Twin Creeks was able to do. We based it on a real life situation, not a. Now, whether that's still real life or not, but we just took that and made it a nice even number because we were like, well,
I think
this is a real project in Helena that could do this.
no, I think that's good.
If I recall correctly, the one project we've had, the Twin Creeks, that one, something like 8 or 9,000 per unit, that one was up funding.
It was more than that.
It was more than that.
I will admit that I only counted the units that the trust fund money actually paid for, not how many we kind of got as a bonus for free. So I divided you into the 52 or 54, not the 72. So I think we got about
48 was
16.
original. application.
Okay, so about 16 for what we directly funded.
So we kind of rounded up
Okay,
to
that makes
the,
sense.
Okay, all right, so we're good there. Construction loan, this, which we're. Any confusion gets any, just cleared up here.
and Chair, this section looks a little complicated if we open both your pages together. And for our new members who may not know, part of what we had here was just a moving of paragraphs because at one of the meetings, the board indicated that, it kind of, I think at one point the fixed term loans were listed, or the order of how things were listed, the board thought didn't make sense, so literally whole sections got moved, but then because we made a change, we showed it, so that's why this is all in green. So in this case, you're probably just looking at red underlined or green strikeouts of where the change happened. But please evaluate any language.
So. We'll follow the amortization. Okay.
Okay, maybe I suppose nitpick the terminology we're using. We're kind of using fixed term financing and fixed term loans interchangeably. Of course, they're more or less the same thing, but I guess in terms of keeping the language in the document consistent, for referring to the actual debt defined language for what we have for fixed term loans, maybe we should update wherever we refer to fixed term financing as fixed term loans specifically.
Okay. Unless they are attended. That's two separate things.
Okay, one more time.
So earlier, under financing structure requirements on the previous page, it's referred to as, construction loans and or fixed term financing. Whereas in the next section, we then define it as fixed term loans. It's just a matter of keeping consistency with the language that we're using. So I would say we should just update all the references of financing to just loans, so in terms of fixed term loans.
Yeah, no, I think that. You good with that, Sarah? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we do get in this paragraph and then gets a little confusing in terms of the construction. Well, I guess it's interest only, okay, so it's still interest only. May not exceed 1 million, such one will not to exceed 3 years. No, okay, fine. Any comments on that first paragraph? Other than the fixed term financing goes to fixed term loans? We're good?
I believe so.
And Chair, part of what we took out here, you may or may not recall, was that there was language that the applicant would propose an interest rate advantageous to their project. And then there was like a minimum, and we were confused why an entity would propose anything other than the minimum. So we took out that language, and then there was a lot of discussion back and forth about, do we set a percent, do we set a trigger for how a percent is set? But that's why that language about the applicant proposing is out.
Not less than necessary doesn't bite, well, what is that?
What is necessary?
What is necessary, especially developers for. They can go on and on, so, but I think without opening up a whole other thing, I think we're probably good there. Move on to the next paragraph. Construction loans may be converted to fixed term loans on stabilization. Okay. Pretty clear. Fixed term loans. About 40 years.
That
Cash
was a
flow section.
recommendation from NeighborWorks, but we compare that around 35 to 40 to match what some of the other funders would be doing.
The loan interest rate is to be set at the time the city notices a window to receive applications. I would suggest that all loan would be at that interest rate rather than the use wouldn't impact it.
So
I mean, I could see, say if you're, like there's a need for a lower interest rate because you're serving lower income people with lower rents, or the structure versus a higher. There's a big difference between serving 60% or 70% median income and 15% or 30%, you know, extremely low, below 30%. Would be set. The interest rate would be set based on what applicant, the window that you're applying into. And that would suggest then the earlier conversation about no more than is necessary, no lower than what is necessary maybe wouldn't be operational because the interest rate would be set based on the window of the application. What was the intent? What do we think?
And Chair, if I may, we can also just go back to the straight 1% that was on all of this money to begin with. We were just as staff looking at multiple different ways to make the fund more sustainable and usable, and part of it was go from 1% to 2% in our current amount. But I don't know that there's any reason to not just stay potentially with 1%. It just means you'll get half the interest into the fund for future use. But then it just says every applicant has the same, or, you know, we don't want to set it at like 5% and then have other funding go to 3%. And they're like, well, bank loans are 3%. Why would we use the trust fund? I think that's why the language was like, at the time someone applies, they will know what their interest rate is, and that will be the interest rate, no matter if interest rates go sky high, whatever they apply that is what it will be. So they have the like security and knowing that, but I don't know if that's helpful or not.
So I'm just saying in terms of the type if we're offering the same interest rate, but there isn't a variance in terms of the level of income. And it just, there's, in the construction loan that we're talking about, no more than at an interest rate that no lower than it's necessary. And we're not really saying that here, so I guess
So we took that part out.
took that.
So
part
it's
out,
just
so-
like straight, you apply, this is what it is for 18 years. If interest rates go to 15%, you're still at 2% or whatever it was, but it's not gonna change, it's not. So that they can actually piece this with their bigger financing, but maybe that's not helpful to an applicant.
Well, and that's kind of what I was thinking, like, we removed the actual definition of what we were aiming for the interest rate. We are not stating an interest rate, now that gives us flexibility from the city standpoint. But from somebody seeking a loan, they're wondering what that interest rate is.
But they will know when they apply,
Yeah.
because it'll be announced at the beginning of the year or
Will it be
whatever.
announced, will it be announced or fine?
Well, it says, will be set at the time, so when the city notices or
Puts the
goes for
application.
applications, it's like, this is what the interest rate is
Yeah.
for that, but I don't know if that's.
It might be helpful to, no, I think it's good to be able to, so you often will see it in relation to, you know, I think it'd be some statement that is, that we're talking about a below market interest rate. I mean, generally there's a struggle here, it's like, you know, if to make this more sustainable, you could charge market rates, you know, but that, I don't think that was the intention, so, so do you want to, you know, at the time, I think it's good that everyone applying for that money will know that's what the interest rate's gonna be on the permanent money, that go round. And, but what would be helpful is if there's some touchstone as to how the city will be setting that, or do you want it open-ended, so you don't have to, has to be tied to an outside index or something.
I'm sure you may recall, there was discussion at a previous meeting about setting it at, you know, I think it was like 3% below whatever market rate was at the Fed on a given date.
But there's
No
like
less
so many
than
different-
1%, there was like all these different variables we
so
put in,
different
and they were
rates
like,
at the Fed, yeah.
maybe we do this. What I don't know is maybe a way to help an applicant have a sense is that we add a comma after receive applications, comma, and add back in no less than 1%. So it's never going to be less than 1%.
Okay, that's good.
Would something like that be?
I think that, I mean, that at least gives them an idea of kind of the range of right now, right?
Mhm.
Like probably just north of 1%. You know, anything more than that, obviously, we're just approaching a bank loan.
And I think it would be good, I think it's good to give the cities some flexibility here and then, but that you might start a practice that we don't know how to figure it out right now in terms of what might be an index. You might say the Board of Housing rate or something that you would,
Because of the Board of Housing at like 4 something right now, weren't we way below at 1%?
Yeah.
I mean, we've previously considered language that would have said, applicants will propose an interest rate advantageous to, oh, no, it's not what we had before. Advantageous to the project, not less than necessary, and in no case less than prime minus 3% or 1%, whichever is greater.
Right,
So we floated different things.
And I think there was discussion at one of the board meetings that was, maybe a little too complicated, but that by adding in a sentence that had flexibility, it meant if the board felt that interest rates maybe needed to go up 1%, they didn't have to take this back to the commission.
Yeah.
But we've got different members and new ideas in the room, so like this is important to go through and talk about when we're trying to make flexibility for an applicant. Are we actually making it too hard for them because they don't know forever and always
Yeah.
trust fund?
as long as we are understanding that the city this is meant to be a below market and that the city that'll be, we trust the city will do that, but and then by saying no less than 1%, that makes clear that there is a floor.
Okay.
But
So we've spoken out the applicant will propose an interest rate.
Yeah.
Do we think it's clear that for each application, and is it true that for each application, if there is some extenuating circumstances and the applicant wants, you know, another interest rate that they can say like, per my application, we think this is a more appropriate rate. Are we accepting that? Are we saying that? Is that something we want to? I
Well,
think we allow it for construction, but not the fixed term. Okay, there, we can go back and check when we get to other sections, but Chair, I believe,
I think,
which is where the current project went, was there were opportunities for applicants to go directly to the commission and ask for waivers from the program, and I think we took it out of fixed term, but left it in construction. I just wanna make sure.
I think setting on a permanent, people will know,
Permanent is permanent.
yeah, I think that's a good thing, and then the commissioner will act on the quality of the project itself in terms of the termination fund funding rather than, us finding. I could see it get very complicated,
But Chair, I wanna make sure I kinda understand the comment you were making. Were you suggesting something like language that's like if 50% or more, or X number of units are reserved for AMIs of under 30%, a 0.25% interest rate reduction is considered, or like, is that what you're talking about? Like if certain
you will
amounts
see that
really
kind of thing,
focus
but
on
for
lower?
this purpose, I think, given its purpose, I think keeping it simpler is probably better. They're trying to have, you'll see that it'll be benchmarked, what is the, and it is related to basically the expected cash flow, that the intent of the money is not to necessarily enrich the developer. It's just to meet a specific community need. And so I think generally we'll probably get at that in terms of just the overall review of the projects.
Okay.
So are people comfortable with the removal of everything else? Yeah. Great. Okay. And down to paragraph, this part, loans may be made directly to the owner or an affiliate entity as benefits the project and approved by the city commission. So, and that statement is so to recognize that the legal ownership changes during the development phase, and that's what you're getting at there, okay? If the name change, I'll heard that, but that's notified, right? Okay. Everyone clear on that? Clear with the folks? Okay.
Oh, Chair, this is the section that allows for some flexibility. That starts with under extraordinary conditions. Page
Oh,
9.
okay, yeah. And that last bit on page 8, everyone see?
Yeah.
Okay. Under extraordinary. All right, yeah. That's good. Any concerns on any of that? We're good there? All right. You can go forward.
Some of the changes, Chair, that were made was to make it clear whether the commission is the entity deciding something or city staff. We wanted to make clear, there were many sections that just said city. I wanted to make it very clear for applicants. Is it the board or is it the commission? But in many cases, it is not staff that make the determination. So the applicants know that it's one of the other entities, and it's not just one staff person saying no or yes.
This is. Again, some objective standard might be helpful for the city commission, where they could be pressured, oh, well, if we get some, I always find having some sort of that, especially when you're in an elected position in public, where some people, where it's perception can carry the day versus the reality of things, but, yeah, let's not get too deep into that, portable. I think this is all good, now the next page, page 10, the only thing I see, again, stating operating expenses per unit from 3,000 to 6,000. I think that's kind of a somewhat an outdated number. It really depends on, again, the nature of the housing you're providing and things like that. If you have staffing, security,
Chair.
I would say, again, finding a benchmark. Because the way this reads is if you're showing operating expenses above $6,000, then your pro forma is not allowed.
So Chair, if I can ask, since, currently, I believe you're the only one in the room who was in the room when these were originally written. Do you know where that dollar amount came from? Or why it was set that way?
I think it came from a time and place far, far away and things were.
Yeah.
Things are simple.
I said, "We're not-"
Sure, I wanna
Yeah.
make sure.
No, I mean, $6,000. I wrote down in reading this because this was a month or so ago. I wrote this down and I know 8,000 per unit is the limit on the Federal Home Loan Bank that they're on right now for their affordable housing program, for their underwriting. And then what I noticed about there, that changes. That's a variable that is directly related to what it costs to hire a contractor to move their snow. Our snow contracts doubled during COVID. Yeah,
So would that be the benchmark then, that would make sense is to set it to that, as opposed to setting a specific dollar amount?
well, you can look at a benchmark like the Montana Board of Housing, I think has some sort of, I don't know off the top of my head, but I think we'd be making a mistake to set it at a fixed dollar amount, because when you pull that up, no.
Sorry, responding to the consultant, sorry.
So I would say, we can come back to that, but I think 6,000 is already outdated.
Chair, can I ask this of you and the board? Do you feel like, if staff can research maybe what Board of Housing is right now,
That would be great.
but knowing that federal's at 8, that there's maybe, an opportunity for us to consult with NeighborWorks Montana, which is the entity that does the underwriting before the board sees an application, to make sure they're actually following all of the guidelines?
Yeah.
That there's some sort of.
Actually, Larry would
benchmark
be a good,
and
Larry would be a good
a
person
maximum.
to ask for what it be. And it wouldn't be like 8,000 per unit, would be, consistent with operating expenses of, Montana Board of Housing financing program, but, versus, it's the Federal Home Loan Bank, which isn't a federal government, it's a private entity that are made up of banks, but,
But if an entity that might be applying for these funds, we've, in multiple different parts of the guidelines and program content, encouraged strongly that they only applied as gap financing when using these other programs, would it make sense then to reference
match
back to
that.
one of the
Yeah.
programs that they,
Well,
like Board of Housing?
this could be
that's
by
probably
saying
what they
$3,000 and
applied
$6,000, you've eliminated, projects that have higher operating expenses. Say you're hiring a social service person or like a staffing person, because of it's more of a homeless, or extremely low income or elderly, and that you're gonna have some on-site staff at a more regular time or something, or that, and I think the Board of Housing has captured it, so I think turning that to staff sounds great.
So if there's something we can do
Yeah,
consistent with Board of Housing or something that Larry recommends. Clearly, this was, at some point, something very important because it's actually listed here twice as two
Right.
bullet points, so.
Yeah.
no, at the time, no,
I
no,
think
$6,000, if you had asked me, 5 years ago, $6,000, but no, I think we'll hear from folks that, yeah, those expenses have gotten, very high. And they will differ based on, again, there's a lot of things that you could seem to be, oh, everyone's playing by the same rules, but if you're doing a different type of housing, you're gonna have higher expenses than if you're, you don't necessarily wanna just set it up for folks who are really taking the higher income and the easier to serve people, within affordable circles. Again, everything is within the affordability. Yeah, okay. So we got that doubling for when we did.
Everything at that 5% minimum construction contingency is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll call that. Or after income trending at 2%. So that's where it did.
No, it started with the if tenant, or it
No,
started
yeah,
with replacement.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
I just thought we were trying to be very repetitive. And
Yeah, I was like, I think that may have been a, editing between documents. Sorry, that's why we're going through it.
I hear you when you say you wanna make clear that these things are going to the city commission, but city commission are part-time elected officials who generally the role of staff is to provide that. So is it meant that there'll be some reporting to staff who would bring it to city commission? Okay.
I believe, Chair, the intent is that before something goes before the city commission outside of public comment, it becomes something on the agenda and come on the agenda.
Right.
Staff does memos and provides all the background information, but the commission makes the actual
So a
decision.
developer can just show up at public comment and say, oh, hey, by the way, yeah.
I mean, Chair, I think they could come to public comment, but then the actual decision would have to be an item on the agenda, which means then the research would happen.
To be fair though, in that vein, if we did want to have something firmer under the fixed from loans portion that we just already reviewed today, to make it clear that there is a set percentage or base it off of prime in some way, that wouldn't be the worst thing, so that we wouldn't have to go to you guys and the commission and get a recommendation about that, what that raise to set.
Yeah.
So consider that
Yeah.
as well.
And then I would encourage something even below, certainly below market, but maybe below, the standard, Board of Housing, whatever they're doing.
Chair, can you have Ellie read back what
Oh,
was
the-
the older version that
That's what I
the
was-
board
Yeah.
decided?
You just
to
say
do?
back to back,
Yeah.
you said that's
Well, that whole
overly
problem-
complicated, but that's pretty
It
much
was
what we're
like
doing with that
3%
original.
less than prime or
Yeah.
something.
So the sentence that we had, sorry, this is pulling us in so bad.
That's why we had to get rid of that.
Yeah, and it's struck out here even, but it did say, applicants will propose an interest rate advantageous to their project, but not less than necessary, and in no case less than prime rate minus 3% or 1%, whichever is greater. So I think we probably not want to have the applicants will propose a rate.
Yeah.
Have it actually be a fixed amount and like, if this is it, deal with it, or use the special circumstances to try to.
But a prime rate is a short-term rate is what I have a concern about,
Well, we'd be able to see what it is at the opening of the
It would still be
application.
the application and
So
then
we say,
take 3% off.
That's what it is. Left.
How do people like that? Do people like that better?
I kind of do. I think that, not putting something is just gonna be more work in the long run.
Yeah, no.
Anything's the easy administrative burden, you know,
Yeah.
that's like, so.
Well, yeah, but also I just could see, commission getting wrapped around, every time this comes up, it's like,
Why?
And do what, number, some would say that's maximizes and others would, it's,
So you want it to be, prime rate, let's
fixed
say
or
minus 3%, but no less than
someone,
one.
yeah.
And, okay.
And Chair, do you want that on, fixed term or construction? Do you want construction just to stay, no less than 2%, and then the fixed term / used to be called permanent is where we do the prime -3?
Which,
Roughly, I think.
there's just realizing language is different between the construction and the fixed term. That you're right, if we just apply that
Marry
to
it.
both, yeah.
Or keep them separate.
This is where our missing unappointed,
Mhm.
housing finance people that we, in the vision of the original committee, cause I'm on some, I know like the Rita committee at Neighborhoods Montana, and I'm on, when the bankers, who are usually very helpful, in these kind of questions.
Mhm.
Yeah. They can give you this is the standard, and
And Chair Riley, if I can, I think there was discussion, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there was discussion at a previous meeting where they wanted the construction loans to have less variation.
Mhm.
And so that it was like, construction was just gonna be an amount. And then
Well-
there was the talk about, so I don't know if you guys want those two languages married, or if you just want. Right now, it's at 2% for construction, if you wanna change that back to 1, or if you wanna marry the construction to the same as the fixed term. Where it sets with prime, or if we set an application, it's up to
I
you
could
guys.
see us just setting a fixed term of 2 for construction loans. What I would say, at least with how it's defined right now, is that we're still giving applicants a proposition of their own interest rate. Which we previously, I guess, discussed, not having them propose their own interest rate.
I mean, but they can't propose less than 2, so.
Touche,
know if they
yes,
want to
yeah. They wanna
propose
give us more
more.
money, I mean, let's not, say no.
It's very clear to me why that would have been there, like, I don't know why an applicant would propose more than, that's why I don't know if anyone remembers why that. Language is in there, or if it's similar to another program. Or if we
Also
should
don't
strike
know
that.
why it would be something that an applicant would want to propose? Would it be more straightforward to have something set out when they're in the application process, or are you interested in building it? I think it would be easier if it's just stated clearly and not like, what do you think? Right?
yeah. In general, and that's,
And I think that could be done.
and our underwriting is based on ensuring that there's an ability to repay versus there isn't anything on the other side of it trying to restrict, developers getting more than their share, or when I know the state has heartburn sometimes, and some of the programs, you underwritten at a certain, assumptions, and then when those assumptions get way better, they're like, wait a second. You guys are walking away with, some money here, but I think that makes it way more complicated than you have to at this point, but it does happen.
So for both, basically, you guys are comfortable with it, reading, retain the sentence that you see in the fixed term loans where it says the loan interest rate is to be set at the time the city notices the window to receive applications,
Yeah.
and will be set at prime rate -2% or 1%, whichever is greater.
Okay, and I think it could even move to, the front of the section. Directly under loan terms, and then it would apply to both the following.
Okay, sorry, I'm confused. I thought that for construction loans, the current proposal was that we take out, applicants are proposing, but that an interest rate is 2%.
Mhm.
Do you
Oh,
want it
okay.
back to being flexible for construction too?
I apologize, I thought we said we were marrying. Just
Well, there was the marrying and then there was the not marrying.
Well, and I was about to ask if
What's
we wanted
there,
to accept less for the construction loans, because typically the nature of the shorter term loans versus longer term loans, of course, is a little bit more interest rate on the front end. I mean, again, I'm not a financier, so I think this is another one of those cases where I don't really appreciate their kind of insight regarding that. Obviously, we'd set construction loans is no less than 2%, in terms of the recent, I guess, suggestions. Do we know where this 2% came from?
It was just kind of pulled out.
We just doubled the 1% because we were looking for ways to bring funds in.
And
As a starting
but
point.
again,
for
this
discussion.
section, Larry will be a good, like, he has no, you know. He would things, he looks at all the different programs all day long and would have a good,
And Larry did provide us a lot of good information about not doing less than 15 to 18 years, sticking with the 35 to 40 years amortization, so amortization is not 18 years on those. He did provide us good information on those to keep them consistent with other programs. Alright, so the actual percentage we set it at, we can talk to him again, but I don't know. I think from our conversations, he was more focused on the terms and the amortization and how that matches more so than what the actual percent is.
Yeah.
But we can always reach back out.
I mean, my correct opinion would be to kind of add back in that, 3% less than subprime or prime mortgage rate. To both loan definitions, but leave it as is. Leave no less than 2% on a construction loan, leave no less than 1% on the fixed rate loan, fixed rate loan. That way, we're still, asking for a little bit more on the construction loan to help ease up that front end burden.
So we are on to anything else in the, I like the mixed use and mixed income. That's good.
It's very fair. Are we now on page
Page
11,
11,
section?
section 11.
You're on to
Hey, the mixed use and mixed
Okay.
income, did anyone have any, anyone good?
Yep.
Okay,
Consistent with our previous revisions.
it's single family. 11. Page 11. So pretty easy.
we there's a lot of partners.
We're not requiring these to necessarily be placed in a land trust, or are we? Yes, we are. The city requires property placed into a land trust to be secured. That's doesn't quite say that, that's saying that for property that's placed in a land trust, it has to be secured with a deed restriction.
It's not saying that in any instance where three or more units are being developed, that you have to have it in the CLT, but if it is, you must have something that actually.
You're not saying
make
you
it
have to.
CLT.
Okay.
I don't read it that way.
I think we went back and forth, so I actually have to read it again because we changed it like 3 times.
I think, well, I mean, I think you're right, the lead into it, the city requires property placed in a land trust, I mean, like you said, if the land is placed in the trust. Whereas you read it as, the city is requiring the property to be placed in that trust.
And that, yeah,
So,
Because I don't think we wanna necessarily, I think land trusts are effective tools, but there are other tools that,
how about we just add in, the city requires that any property placed in the land trust?
okay, any property, beautiful.
Thank you, that's
Alright.
helpful. Yes.
you don't wanna put all your properties into CLT?
Well, but it would only be if
It's
it's
a
selling
single
that
family,
to single family.
Yeah.
And
So
to
this
spend-
cost limits, thing, again, one of those things that got completely blown out by price increases in the state. So a lot of the federal programs, for home ownership through Department of Commerce, will run into the problem that there are no houses at that rate because those numbers are set by the feds and the feds haven't kept up on that. I don't know what those, I'm not on top of that, so I don't know what those numbers are now, but what's good about it is that there is a objective benchmark. But I know that I think it's coming back around. I think they must have fixed it. But
And Chair, at one point, the part of this section that was proposed changed by the board was a discussion. I'm only saying this for the people who are new, who weren't there, was that they're in the keeping the program flexible, but also knowing that any changes to this specific document have to go to the city commission. There was discussion about removing any specific website links to specific documents and instead naming the document and saying that a person can find them online, but if we didn't have the specific link, then every year when it changed, we would have to take the whole document back. So part of that was just saying at Montana Department of Commerce, but I see we left a colon, so it's a period, and then we take
okay.
away the website, but I don't know. I think a lot of what we've referenced is things at Commerce and Montana Housing, because we anticipate that many applicants will already be using Commerce
Again,
programs to keep it consistent,
You
and
can-
then it
you
changes.
can rely on
they
you guys
change.
to pick. Cause I can think of a couple, because like the Board of Housing, I think has a different level than the home program has or CDBG has.
You know, which is more advantageous.
I think generally the Board of Housing one is a.
Okay, so then we've got the right one referenced here.
Okay.
But should we say instead
But
of Montana
Montana
Housing, is there?
Montana Housing and Montana Department of
Commerce.
Commerce would include all the programs.
Do we wanna say Montana Board of Housing specifically?
Well, I would wanna look and see what, I would trust you guys would look into that and pick the one that's more advantageous, that provides more flexible.
It would be more advantageous, Chair, at the time when.
No, not at the time. If you pick one or the other, that's consistently, one will be higher because what you don't wanna be stuck on is something that, we're allowing this for homeownership, but no, you can't actually find a house at that price in this market, kind of.
So it looks like they have a very, if I remember correctly, Chair, because I looked like 2 weeks ago, I think, they have very specific charts that are the current rates and income that are their purchase price limits.
Yeah.
And so are you recommending that we just go and see which programs listed and whichever one is higher? When we go look now is the program that we list here, because
Yeah, I think it's.
NeighborWorks
I think
needs
it's-
to know which one we're
Right.
comparing.
It's like anything that's high gives me heartburn.
Yeah, I would say the Montana Board of Housing, single family rate, and again, Larry will be a good. Or maybe not Larry on that one, but NeighborWorks Montana would give you a good.
I just want to make sure where we need to be specifically are, because when we pay an entity to do all the underwriting, they need to know which program's dollars they're comparing to see if an application is eligible or not, if they are following the requirements we set here. So where we need to be specific and then where we don't. That's helpful so that we can give them good guidance on how to provide you all with good underwriting information. Do you mind Googling those two right now?
Let's blow it out. Let's see what.
Cooperate.
No cooperate.
I can't see, then I have my glasses on, so if somebody wants to
You
try.
want to use my glasses?
Didn't necessarily think I was gonna have to look at the screen that much.
There we
So
go.
let one person.
There we go.
What did you look at? Board of Housing or what?
Board of Housing, let's see.
I think it's housing.mt.
Okay, so it's the
Yeah, I gotta go old then, yeah.
current rates,
I still go to the old one and then let it grab me.
so it says. The eligible for Montana Board of Housing loan, the purchase price and total annual household income cannot exceed the limits below. Exception for the Montana Veterans Home Loan Program, the MBOH plus 0% support down payment, so let's see what these are looking at. For the city of Pelham, Lewis and Clark,
Maybe elsewhere.
yeah, so this is like,
page.
this is way, yeah. It's very, so the, so those is 566,000, so let's compare that to, home program.
It's probably not too, but just to the one sentence above the chart that says what they call this. Board of Housing income and, oh, they just call it
Purchase
price limits. So can we call it the regular bond program related limits? So that an entity applying always knows which one, if they end up with more than one quick reference guide on their website.
So, so one value is the. So the home ownership value limits. Based on FHA. And those are the ones that have gotten where you couldn't use the money. People will have the spreadsheets. So what's the problem is that the Montana, they don't gather the information enough. So it gets out of whack, it was major changes, so we could do. I think if, I think we can go for the Board of Housing is the way to go, and then, is there? They're actually quite high, but, people can figure it out then.
Because that's not the purchase price, that's just the construction cost limit, is what we're setting in this. We're saying the construction cost can exceed the purchase price limit set by Commerce. Is that correct?
Yeah, that seems,
Yeah. Cause you,
Well, I think we need to be able to, I understood these statements were in here so that there was an idea of can an applicant come in and say, I'm building a house that costs $1 million to build and I want, 2% interest loan for it? I think that might be why that was there to set those.
Right, it's all being declared showing you these funds to go out for like.
for which?
Lifetime projects.
Yeah, well, like that projects, have their own problem.
And I think, Chair, maybe part of the discussion here as well is, does the board feel like the highest and best use of these funds is building single family dwelling units, or is it just
I think
with
certain,
the $1.4 million left in the fund is the highest and best use only?
I think
multifamily
we should be supporting single family home ownership of some sort. But it could be condos, townhouses, duplexes,
rental?
that if you're gonna have an affordable housing fund, it should be that continuum. That being said, that construction, where I've seen that, certainly Habitat is the best example of folks actually
Mm-hmm.
getting it done and really at a price point that anyone would agree is affordable. What I've seen other organizations trying to build, especially using federal dollars and stuff, that it gets to be really out of hand, and where it becomes more effective is where I used to do a lot of home buyer assistance for people with disabilities all over the state. And just by, be deed restricted, there was affordability, in that there would be a share of appreciation in the value. And so that maintained the affordability, and we were able to do this clean, simple, with no federal regulations getting in the way. And so, there's a lot of folks who've tried to do construction, and, there's really not a lot of good examples outside the Habitat model.
Mhm.
So,
Just felt like being remiss if I didn't ask. if
so,
this
so
was-
when I see the cost limits, I'm thinking of the way it's used. That wasn't a construction limit, that was the purchase,
Yeah, that was a
Purchase
purchase, including land, yeah.
including land.
But
It's
you
a-
look at the eventual purchase price.
That there should be, you shouldn't be in any way, it would undermine the program. Kind of like when the first shot at trying to do affordability in the Sealy building, and then the units got, now they would seem like a screaming deal. We should have bought them all. And then sold it and funded the
That's
housing
a
trust.
good example.
No, but it's like, it shows how hard that is.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's allowed.
things get done, but I think that using the Board of Housing purchase price limits, that we're not as affordable as it gets at the people who are buying it, and also the type of housing it is. And you don't want to set it too low, because you might squeeze out folks, and you want
Mhm.
an indicator that changes with the time, or you'd be changing this all the time, and you don't want to be doing that. So I think that whatever they want to call that, I guess it's with their branding, everything's Montana Housing now, but it's
That's
whatever
the
that.
new name of their division.
No, but whatever that, what we just had up on the thing,
Which
that-
apologies, Sarah, I didn't share a screen when we were looking at it. Sorry.
Is it shared now, so she can see it?
No, but I can.
Yeah, what I will say is that these numbers definitely seem expensive, a little expensive for, an actual new build of that caliber, but nobody's building single family homes that aren't.
It's not,
expensive.
well, the thing is, we want
It's all
to
development.
strip it out from construction costs to purchase price,
Yeah,
or total, because that's what we're wanting to get at, is that how much it costs, it really doesn't matter, it's what the buyer is paying for it.
So Chair, I don't want to make sure I understand, at the sentence, it's currently on page 11, the proposal is to say, instead of total construction costs for newly constructed, et cetera, would be total purchase price for newly constructed or converted?
And by converted, we mean existing. I'm thrown by converted, are we?
Maybe we just say newly constructed?
No, I
No,
think it
or
needs
existing,
Yeah, but converted is a bit of a clause,
I
right?
think that this honestly is language that probably Andrew recommended be incorporated, tying it back to the HUD programs.
so
You don't
this,
want your cost of construction to exceed like the value of the home upon completion.
right, okay.
Does that make sense?
But I think more important too, more standard too, is something like what's, is that the purchase price should not exceed. I think that's more important, and if you limit the purchase price, you're gonna limit, as long as it's within reason.
Interesting.
But the converted single family, when I read that, is that a rehab single family?
Or is it an office building that's been converted?
Or is it into new apartment condos, something like that, and I think are we still open to kind of like a home buyer assistance add-on, or we're
Well, the
doing
program
all?
already exists.
We
Huh?
took
The
it out
program
because
already
it exists elsewhere.
We don't wanna duplicate funding sources that are already available to folks in the community.
It would be an extender. Okay, I got you.
I think,
Alright.
from my opinion, the cost limits, if it's applying to the final sale price, should it then be under eligibility? Because we have the,
Okay, so you're right, you're right.
affordability
The
section
construction costs, I'm sorry, because this is under the unit development,
under
and
it.
that's why it's limited to construction costs.
But now that we're talking about it,
Yeah.
I'm realizing that we have affordability for rentals, but we don't really have affordability for single family dwelling unit.
And maybe,
And that's I'm on page 6. Sorry, everybody, I went backwards.
Going back.
Words.
I was going forward and I was
We're
like,
moving
oh,
forward,
my
I'm going back. What am I doing?
Chair, if I may, I do want to remind everybody that part of what we're looking at here is that this document was not any sort of final proposal. It was a variety of different ideas in different sections, which is why we do want to make sure that something stays consistent throughout. Once a decision by the board is made, we do want to go back and look that it's consistent, because there were a variety of different things that got thrown out as ideas, but not like a clean final document. So going back is important if it all of a sudden becomes inconsistent. So thank you for catching that.
yeah, no, that's. Are we suggesting a 20,000 per unit limit on units being built there?
For what they can take as a loan, I believe so, but I don't know that I think that may not have made it to this version. Oh, yes, it is. It's on page 12.
Page 12.
If you guys
Point
think that
out,
should be
yeah.
a ceiling on overall awards, that's also something that you guys need to consider at this stage. of recommending to the
This
commission.
ceiling is currently set at $400,000. But that's for the rental, and so it's whether you have
You had a million now, so.
$1 million for construction, and then when they convert, they need to pay $600,000 back. The current project was not, because they asked for an exception. But if you want those same loan, if you want that same, dollar amount total for the loans, in addition to the 20,000 per unit, then we should probably add that in here. For a single family, so an entity is not asking for more than $1 million. Or maybe you do want it to be more than $1 million for a single family.
Well,
It's harder for the longevity of the fund. Serving as. many
However,
costs as
for
possible.
please remember that for single family only, it's only short-term construction loans. They don't get to finance this out for 18 years. So there's that whole different section, which is where we're not at yet, because we were still in cost limits and eligibility of who would live there. The loan terms here are very different.
You want to?
If you want to finish what you were trying to say, that might.
I mean, I think I don't know, does anybody have questions? I mean, did I make that fairly clear? And maybe I'm missing it, but I don't see home, let's see, I was on page 6. And we have affordability requirement for rentals. But I don't see affordability requirement for single family dwelling unit. I see. Yeah. So to my mind, the section that we have under underwriting. And I hear what you're saying, is that it sounds like we were talking more about the, build cost versus the sale cost, and that's part of the underwriting requirement. But should there be a cost limit section under the continued affordability section for a single family unit?
And I do think if I can add in there, that was part of the discussion of can single family dwelling units apply if they're not in a land trust that's secured into perpetuity, which would then be more than the 35 years that you're referencing for rentals. I think that's where that decision needs. Where Riley made the suggestion that it said the city requires that any property placed into a land trust. Maybe the board wants to say only when it's in a land trust or land trust type model have a deed restriction. That would be up to all of you. Or if you wanna put in the 35 years. It's listed, you know what I mean, like where you wanna put that in, right? Cause once somebody owns the home, you're gonna ask them to leave if they get a better job.
No, you don't.
Right.
But what you do is you capture appreciation
On the sale.
on the sale of the house.
You get a deed restriction or.
Right, deed
a CO,
restriction.
Yeah,
So yes to deed restrictions all the time then?
Well, for the money, I mean, do we wanna recapture the money? Or is there a forgivable thing? I think we wanna, to sustain the thing, we wanna promote people being able to get into a home. And not necessarily that they wouldn't be getting into a home period without some of this assistance. And then that they share, if like housing has done and doubled, they would get to participate in that appreciation. It's not like the current 819 money where we don't get to fully participate in it, but that to equal to the amount that they put in, but that the money, are we planning to recapture this if it's not in a land trust?
Sure. Oh, as I say, I think here, maybe where we need to clarify language is whether or not, I don't believe the city is selling any of these units or in charging any way of the resale. It's the
Man,
construction loan only to the developer who is constructing single family housing, and that they must pay it back and they have to sell it to appropriate it without this 25% penalty. So they can't just sell it outside of that. But what happens for what the owner who was eligible does when they go to resell it, I think this section is just single family dwelling unit development is only construction loans.
Yeah.
but
And
that,
whether
but
that's
you don't
right or
wanna,
not right.
you don't wanna be, so, you don't wanna be. I'm not familiar with the kind of subsidy in the construction, because then what you also wanna avoid is like someone getting the affordable unit and turning around
Mhm.
and there's no limit on their resale, you know, so community land trust keeps that affordable. Generally, a deed restriction would also serve a similar purpose.
I wonder if that's why there's a 25% penalty on it. Like you said, to mitigate that concern, I wonder if that's why that was added in there, not consider the occupied.
I'm sorry, which statement are you reading from now?
the single family, it's on page 12 of the document, but I don't know what page it is on yours. Back in single family, referencing back to what she's mentioning of the period of affordability for the rentals, how that compares to this. For single family, if we don't require deed restrictions,
If we don't require deed restrictions for.
everything, because right now we're not requiring a deed restriction.
Except for where on page 6 it says we do.
But that's only for rental,
For rent.
I think is where we're thinking the confusion is, that that's
Right.
continued affordability for multifamily rental housing.
Oh, I see.
And now we're in single family
So we don't
unit
have-
development,
I'm
there's,
sorry.
and there's
I was
some
wondering-
inconsistency,
Okay.
I think is what we're
There's-
seeing.
That's what I get for looking at. HUD stuff.
Historically, there's
Sorry.
two ways in homeownership. You do a recapture of the kind of the subsidy and the appreciation. In a shared appreciation, you know. Or you're requiring that the seller, original seller has to then find someone who is an eligible home buyer. Which is,
And is that done by deed restriction?
that's done by deed restriction, but I think it's a lot. I've been involved in lots of things over the years that is to recapture.
Mhm.
And then what you do, it can limit buyers' interest in the property.
Interest meaning, desire to look, not actual, like.
No, there's like the long term where they feel like
Hmm.
their improvements and stuff may not be, that they're foolish if they have to.
So it's like sort of this double standard on like, this is how a normal house is sold, it's like yours.
Right. I think you're better off that the sale of the home could occur in a normal market. And that two things can happen. I think if you want to deed restrict it, that the house is gonna stay to that specific property, that's where community land trust makes sense. But if it's someone building out, you know, say, getting a construction loan to bring down their cost of building the thing, and that it's a public subsidy. And again, I don't know if you would then get, like, many private contractors who would sign on for that. Hmm?
I think that there have been folks who have expressed interest,
Yeah.
but they couldn't come forward out, but I mean, I think it's in the city's interest to ensure in as much as possible that for a defined term, via either deed restriction or a CLT, whichever legal avenue is pursued, that the city assures that their funds are spent in a manner that the housing will retained is affordable.
And I
So-
think oh,
And so, yeah, just fix the sentence on page 11 and where we had said to put in the words that any, that it's the city requires that such property. Instead of such, to deal with that. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I'm not tracking, so are you recommending that all single family is deed restricted?
If it's to be sold. Rather than rented.
Yes, okay.
And what would be and are you just recapturing the original? Or are you going to recapture based on appreciation? Or
I think we're not recaptured, currently, I think it's not showing any is recaptured, it's just that it has a deed restriction for eligibility of future owners.
Oh, future owners, so that
Yeah.
they would not be
We don't
selling,
recapture any.
like, we don't recapture, it, so that the seller would have to find an eligible.
Yeah.
And that's a
The
little,
land trust or the seller, the tap owner, whomever it might be.
Which really, I think, maybe comes back to, is this fund able to manage or figure out how all that works, when really this is just a construction loan that they pay back? We put a deed restriction on it, it's there, or should single family dwelling not be there unless it's with, I mean, there's earlier language that talks about applicants being experienced in the type of housing they're providing. So an individual, like, if I were just a developer who'd never done this, my application would not be as good as someone who has done this type of housing before and has parameters to make sure the next buyer is. In evaluating if two applications
This-
in, maybe?
Just in the history of providing affordable home ownership, the model that the homebuyer assistance is the easiest one to apply. It's buying directly at the market. It's not, and where you maintain affordability is that you're recapturing in some fashion, and that would come back, and that's done through deed restriction. And,
But what I.
the laws have changed since I was deeply involved in that, and that's why a lot of folks doing homebuyer assistance now run it through NeighborWorks Montana, because they have the capacity to do that kind of work, because whatever the Frank Dodds Act or whatever changed like the definition of lenders, and that, we need certain.
So I wonder if this whole section existed
But we're not
instead
We're not
of
that.
doing, a home buyer assistance
You're not a bank,
where
but the way,
Riley's
the fundamental.
given the money, instead, we're saying this money can only be used if you're actually making new homes that are this, right? Instead of helping
Yeah, but
someone
new
go buy an
homes, see, the thing is,
existing one,
affordable home
we're
ownership, if you limit affordable home ownership just to new homes being built, it's a very small subset of homes.
Again, about devil's advocate there. You
Do we-
just tie it to people that are leveraging Tech Home CDG or who have these periods of affordability already defined in the program requirements, so that we don't have to deal administratively with that, and that takes away then single home owner,
I was
single
saying,
family homeowner
I don't,
housing sector.
I haven't been involved in it for over 10 years in terms of but
It's
This
changed.
is it's changed, but that it was not I put out like $3 million to people with disabilities, and when they sell their house, I'm still getting contacted about it because where it goes
The
back
long
to this
tail.
a long tail, and it's like, well, this is how this is done. Remember, 25 years ago, someone bought, guy with mental disabilities in Red Lodge bought a house for $65,000 that's now worth $500,000 and has to move into a nursing home.
We're gonna be drinking my time.
Yeah. But it works because the appreciation, it doesn't go away after some programs can say after 30 years, it just a giveaway to the folks, but most programs, it's in perpetuity. When you sell the house, you pull out certain things and then you share into it. There's the homeowner who has purchased it gets a tremendous benefit. In these folks' case, they create a special needs trust that improves their quality of life through their kind of thing. So that's the simplest thing. There has not been, you can't really point to the Habitat, for example, and even Habitat, I think locally here, we're trying to do something very exciting in terms of going to scale. But generally, that's a small 3 or 4 houses, and maybe the problem's too big, but if we just turn our back on home ownership is pivotal to the character of this community, and it also opens up rental, and that's one of our biggest challenges. So I don't know if we just say it's just too hard to do it. I don't even know what the deed restrictions. Usually the documents that NeighborWorks Montana uses, and I think theirs are in perpetuity, and I think something about the appreciation share has gotten complicated, but.
And I guess I go back to, I think this section currently is a loan to the person who is either converting or building, and is less about, other than they pay a penalty if they sell to someone who's not eligible. And so maybe we
So
need
what
to
you're
change
saying,
some of this and add more to get to what you're talking about.
to your point
That's not
earlier,
here.
you're saying there already is existing home buyer assistance.
You don't want
And
to
then
recreate.
All we're focusing on is construction or renovation
Yeah.
or conversion Okay,
Where
now I got it,
possible.
I'm,
Or we're
okay.
trying
And
to,
that someone could use home buyer assistance as part of that deal, but
yes,
the city money would only be,
this is only debt financing to begin with.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, yes, if there's an existing program at any level in the state, whether it's NeighborWorks, state of Montana or otherwise, we don't want to have a duplicate.
so we scratched earlier, no home buyer assistance, and that we're not, no, it took me a while.
And the
to get there,
NeighborWorks thing was
but
not in play when this version was back, right?
Right.
That happened 2 years
But
ago.
the statewide,
Yeah, but that,
When
you say
we
what,
worked on-
yeah, but they also have other home buyer assistance that they've done for
Yeah.
40 years. But the, not NeighborWorks Montana, but NeighborWorks.
Whoever banks, there's a bank in Missouri.
And so but this money is only going for development in some form. Okay, got it. So we're not, and that's, so it has to be new land terms or deed restricted, but I don't know how that deed restriction works for, if it's just an individual home buyer, that they're somehow going to have to even know what the meaning of who is an eligible, affordable home buyer at that stage.
and I think that's an important thing that maybe was not addressed in here, which is
Yeah.
why it's important to look. I think, also, there's been some discussion. And please note, like, all of this, again, is up to the commission to decide, and the current commission deciding what they do or don't wanna do, but some of what staff has presented to the commission is talking about how, maybe this fund, given the limited dollar amounts, does not need to be everything to everyone. Which was part of the, if a statewide program exists for something else, maybe we don't do that anymore. But also, information you've brought up is something that's clearly missing in here that is important to figure out. Now, wait a second, what happens when the second buyer goes to buy?
Well, if it's an SLT, it's pretty cut and dry.
It's,
And then the deed restriction also runs with the land, not the property owner, so
That's
it's
what I was
not.
thinking, as long as the deed restrictions on there, doesn't
Yeah.
matter, sometimes
So
sold,
as
it's
long
on
as
there.
we
for-
require
the
it and
period
for it
of
optional.
Or is
so
it
that we
right?
require it, and that, I mean, for right now, like Habitat would be able to do that, but no one
Yes.
else would be doing that locally, but there's
Well,
other,
no, there are others.
Some
locally?
folks
Yeah.
come and say they wanna try to,
do
you
it.
know, buy a
Some
parcel of
folks,
land and build like townhomes or something.
I mean, not really.
We've had some individuals come that are not developers, but who are people who are looking for solutions for themselves and friends. Who are interested in these funds.
And are engaged with Trust Montana, like they're trying to go through the motions, but.
Not that we wanna tailor this to any specific applicants, but just knowing there are entities out there that are not developers who are trying to figure out how this might help them build something, and they've been working with Trust Montana, it's costing everyone to make sure that they don't turn around and build something that they somehow income excluded themselves.
What's
from
that?
the
They're almost trying to have a co-op,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Pocket neighborhood co-op kind of situations. And whether
well,
those
you know, there's,
situations
you know,
would.
Neighborhoods Montana's getting big in the co-op housing right now, so to create cooperative home ownership.
It's here from Vermont, it's great, but it's not always that cheap.
I know somebody who.
But I get a little nervous that
housing when the
a
job
local
changed.
government, that it's an exclusive group that's coming in. I see a lot of fair housing issues and things like that popping up if the money is limited.
Which is why maybe some of this becomes easier for the board to feel confident about, is that an applicant really needs to be able to qualify for these larger dollar amounts, so this is still gap financing. That
But are we
has
limiting to
great
20,000 per unit or,
Mhm.
okay,
That's a proposal, just to make sure that, cause currently, without any of the red. A project in a land trust could get a grant for up to 50% of the cost. I believe is how it currently reads,
We're trying to build in some equity with. the
which means
language.
it would never come back.
Yeah, we've never seen it. Yeah,
on homeownership.
it's a grant funded.
Yeah, I don't,
Out the door.
I don't think that's what,
we don't know if that was really the original intent, but it seemed like there was some language where like, oh, well. Does this or does this not meet what the real intent was?
In the higher level, you probably access to these money stuff. But then there's the just overarching issue of like, okay, we're calling this a trust fund, it's not operating.
we've already addressed that. We're dropping.
Good.
Okay.
I don't know that we really.
That was our, that was our.
Don't bring that up.
Don't bring that up. We're out of here.
We spent like 2 hours on that.
We're resigning.
So,
It
and
is
I know
good,
Sarah
it's
needs to
not
take a break, when she needs to take a break, we'll lose our
Okay.
quorum.
Okay.
So, and that'll be a good time for a break for everyone.
I'd take a break. Just so you know, the regroup was that it can
Oh.
still be called a trust fund, cause other housing trusts don't operate as
It's
trusts,
good.
but we need to kind of
It's
put
fine.
parameters in and use.
You don't need to, you say no more, literally
tried
say no
something
more.
like that.
No.
So when do we wanna break?
Sarah, will you remind us, did you have to go at 3:10?
Yeah, about, 3:10.
Okay.
And then I'll be back within like,
We'll just take a break until you get back.
Just have to walk up the.
okay. Yeah, I should be back by 3:30 probably.
You say I'm hoping to get out of here by 4:30, but.
So
Don't forget to go to
Michael
gate two.
here
I
needs
got
to
rid
leave
of
at
it.
4:15.
Oh,
And I got rid
yeah.
of, I got rid of my, I was able to move it to early.
Okay, so 4:30
4:30, yeah.
stop today.
Because we have to
Okay.
keep a quorum the whole time. Well, we have to end them. Is it at all beneficial? Chair, to come back to page 11, 12, and 13? When we're talking single family and maybe look at some of the other sections.
Where is this section you're saying that you're gonna, the city was gonna put in 50% of the funds,
Let's see,
that's, I forget that.
page 13. Under financing terms for land trust development, the city may make grants available to these projects. The grant amount shall be determined on a case-by-case basis and will not exceed the amount of funds necessary to complete the project. We can't make money on it.
But we scratched all that. We scratched all.
That was part of the proposal, was like, maybe it needs to be in a land trust and not be a grant. Or do
Or-
restricted,
For the,
single.
for this, just for the, because it's only new construction, conversion, or rehab of properties, and that it's not for any other home ownership thing. I think that's probably the way it has to go. It has to be a land trust.
Cause really,
But,
these
you
funds
know,
are going.
and we
into
wanna
the
keep, we wanna,
Developer.
that we wanna talk about, are we doing 20,000 per unit across the board?
Mhm.
Home ownership, rental?
Mhm.
That seems to be about the only way that we can be consistent, because otherwise, like, you would be, you know, if you're providing 50%, you know, if you're doing 250,000 a unit on home ownership, then things are way out of whack.
We're trying to provide an equitable subsidy across the board when we were working on the amendment.
Yeah.
Because page 12, part that we scratched out and changed was 20,000, kind of in the middle, it originally said. The amount of the HHTF funds invested in a single family home cannot exceed 50% of its prospective value as evidenced by, so. Instead of trying to figure that out, it's just straight dollar amount, whether that's a good idea or bad is what we're here to discuss.
Let's keep it, are we in agreement, 20,000? We can pick a number, 20,000, or it can be 30,000.
Well, I mean, kind of going back to some previous arguments of finding a benchmark, so we don't have to change this number,
Yeah.
you know, inflation keeps acting. I mean, the 50% of its prospective value is at least somewhat more of a benchmark than us out of it. We'll find $20,000 and come back here 3 years later, it's bulk the number again.
But if a home is $400,000, that's 200, or not,
Yeah.
just one individual home.
Mhm.
Or 200,000
Agreed.
would be ton of partners.
I'm not agreeing on the 50% part, what I'm saying though is that.
This isn't
establishing a
a-
benchmark instead of defining it as 20,000.
20,000 per unit, I like that idea, that it should be adjustable, that's built into it.
Well, again, so I, you know, doing a find all replace for replacing 20 grand with another number at a later date is an easy modification that we
Yeah.
can take to you guys into your submission. It's
Mhm.
administratively not a heavy
Yeah.
lift for us,
That's it.
so.
And so by setting it at 20,000 or 30,000, whatever, it's really saying, again, this is meant to be kind of to help leverage other dollars that are gonna be in the project. And so those people that are coming to this and going, but we wanna do this thing, you know, 2 houses, you know,
Well, it's
my brother and I are gonna build houses on the same, you know, that's, you know, and you give us each $200,000. That's not what this money's for.
with $1 million, you want to start 5 homes or 50,
Yeah,
so.
I
that
do
math
think
is right.
too, I really, Chair, appreciate your thoughts that somehow what we have here for single family dwelling units may or may not be fully protecting us with fair housing and what you said, if two brothers come in, but they're currently all eligible and they follow the rest of us, but then they're not actually, they're making an LLC and then selling it to themselves, do we run into issues with fair housing or like, how do we make sure we're careful when it's one individual person and not?
Well, we,
Which is probably why these are the construction loans to the developer to build and the developer is responsible for
yes,
following that.
so the city is not in any way responsible for the enforcement of fair housing. So I don't think we need to be, that's the developer's jurisdiction. They have to follow building code requirements, fair housing is another thing, but we are not the people at the city of Helena who actually make sure that they're.
no, but if you're giving money to kind of a structure that's already.
We could say
Don't we
occupied
have the
with
language here
eligible.
saying that they have to comply with all required?
Mhm.
So don't we have just boilerplate just somewhere?
Yeah.
I think, we don't need to get tied up on the example, but the example where a bunch of friends come together and they wanna come in and say, oh, we're going to restrict among this land trust that is owned by us. Or-
And sometimes the units they're
Yeah.
building too.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could build like a little chunk of ground, you know, you could build 10 houses altogether. And that be kind of like a co-op, but the only people in, it's not open to the general public, it's open to a small subgroup of people.
And while, Chair, that's in theory, that is basically exactly what an application is going to look like that the committee will get as soon as this opens up. So I think probably having that as a concern of yours, we probably do want to, I don't think we wanna tailor the guidelines to any specific project we know about, but if we know of things, we wanna make sure we make it very clear what is and isn't eligible if it were to.
Page 4 speaks to the fair housing issue. I don't think we need to talk about that probably anymore, because it says, under section B, that projects benefiting from HHDF assistance must comply with the Fair Housing Act as administered by HUD, again, not the city.
Is HUD administrative?
Well, I'm not, Michael,
Yeah,
let's
that's
not
not your
politics
problem,
today.
There was a discussion that.
That's not actually.
We have, I'm sure you know, we've had property owners be sued for not following fair housing. It has happened in Helena.
Yeah.
There was discussion that we change all of that to design standards.
We can, yeah, we can.
No, well, in that section-
Universal design only.
What were that design
Child
standard?
No, they want it.
Oh,
Oh, that was
universal
not
design.
following housing,
Design
but
standards
only
is part of
following
the-
their housing.
So Fair Housing Act only applies to 4 units and above.
Yeah.
And then this other stuff is just universal design that you would have.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so fair housing isn't going to apply to single family.
This was just talking
Okay.
about the design standards, not the fair housing also. That it's public money that you wouldn't want, that if it's just a small group that came in and saying, you know, myself and, you know, and I think when I was young, I could have easily gotten 6 friends, you know, we're gonna split up this thing, we're all gonna build a house and we're gonna get the city to help subsidize it.
We've gotten touched about that, so glad.
Mhm.
You're not the only one.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess the community land trust we're back to where we began, but if we that a community land trust is truly a community land trust in that it's public. It's not private land trust where it's only held by those within the circle that, you know, that Habitat for Humanity is not is open to the public. Most of the community, I don't know of any public community land trusts that are not open to the public, but they're not, like saying, well, we're not gonna work with them. They have some screening kind of thing, but then again, that's where fair housing comes into existence, that you can say, you know, we're only, when it's, the closer it is that you're only letting your friends in, that's a problem.
So do you feel one way or the other that we shouldn't require that the single family homes be placed in a CLT rather than afford them an opportunity for a deed restriction? So is that?
Well,
fair
the more
housing?
we talk it through with the deed restriction piece being, when it's in the form of more like a loan document, it's, and how you get it back and all that becomes very simple. So you put a deed, so let's see how it works on a new construction. So you agree this much money has been put into this house, and that you're gonna, so the deed restriction we're talking about we're saying that they would have to sell it to an eligible person down the road.
Speaks to resale, it doesn't do the things like, and this was a conversation with the Urban Dreamers project, that you might recall. Arena Herald provided a handout to me that was basically a pro-con list of CLT versus deed restriction. And a lot of the reasons people were like, deed restrictions are a lot stronger, and here's why, is not just push the works for us on Hannah. But the overall maintenance and upkeep of the underlying property, since the dirt isn't owned by the homeowners, that is assured in a better way, perhaps, than deed restriction, amongst other criteria.
A deed
Some funding
restriction,
sources.
I agree when you're talking about this house has to stay affordable, regardless
Not
of this.
compatible with some funding sources though, like LIHTC, right?
Right.
So.
Well, my tech is a really,
Multifamily anyway.
is multi-family.
That was part of the equation of that project, that Rocky had to steer clear of. In a CLT. It's not complicated at all.
We fit a snag here. So do we wanna come back? Well, I think we have a couple of things here that we wanna be clear on. We don't want an open-ended, you know, we wanna put limits on how much any of the projects are getting per unit, and so are we gonna, right now, we're using a holder of 20,000, but maybe wanna find something that, and again, what 20,000, is that enough to get interest? And it,
Couple
so,
penny more than what they got on the previous basis or something.
and so like that's upwards of, you know, a 48 unit, that's close to $1 million, about 980,000. So 20,000, and now on a home ownership deal, if you're doing 3 houses, and are you going to want to accept a bunch of restrictions for $60,000? Yeah, though you want to have a program that works.
And Sherry, I think that kind of comes back to the questions that we've had as staff that we want to propose the board to really get. We don't have good, because the commission has changed, we don't know the exact intent of the commission at the time it was created, right? So now we're looking at what really works in our current housing environment, what things maybe need to be tweaked, where's the highest and best use, and what may or may not be the intent of the current commission and the current advisory board. Knowing that there's about $1.4 million. Currently, there is no funding coming in outside of $100,000 a year. If there's one project left, how do we
John.
Hello.
Who was painting?
That's
What do you like?
a little.
Here's
Yeah, so, okay, so, alright, thank you.
So are we then selling on the
Well,
idea,
does anyone?
20,000, much like anything else, and we kind of reinforcing that if we go with a community land trust, a public community land trust, the public, I think we need to put in there that a public community land trust is not, you could have a land trust among family members somehow, probably. Don may be able to speak to that, but what we're saying, that by having a public entity involved, it helps us with the marketing. We know that they're gonna maintain the long-term affordability. And three, there will be a type of entity that possibly could leverage outside funds better. And this purpose of this fund, bottom line, either rental or home ownership, is to be more like a small gap filler and to leverage a bunch of other funds and not pay the whole way.
So, I mean, the whole, as I'm reading this, earlier, we established the matching criteria, the fund matching criteria under section.
Page 11.
And so,
Go back for
yeah, page 4, section 7, match requirement. And so, I mean, I don't know how this might pencil out in some projects, but 50% of the prospective value is too much, as I pointed out. 20,000 is a bit too static. I mean, why wouldn't we just have this match our actual match, requirements? I know it's not exactly apples to apples, considering one's the development cost and one's the actual appraised cost of the but why wouldn't we just match that 20%? Or the actual value of
It's
the,
not actually 20%.
I guess 5 to 1 would be 18%, 1/6.
And with that's more just a sort of like, a pragmatic ratio that we kind of lean on. But,
It's an idea. Somebody tell me how stupid I am about it.
well, consider like new construction for a single family home, let's just say that home ends up being like $600,000. A lot.
That's $100,000 of trust fund to that house. 100.
So again, it's just, it depletes the funds that much more quickly.
Yeah.
And is that the intent of this trust fund, is that in keeping with what ought to be done with?
Did you use the cost limit?
Agree, I mean, you just lose that efficacy of scale when you start funding the smaller projects.
Which
Well,
again,
just why we brought the question to all
so
of
you
you.
want to do multi-family, particular,
Full circle, right?
Or, I mean,
it's not entirely born out of saltiness on my part, I promise. Or ease of utilization.
I think too, something important to think about too is, I don't think any of us as the city wanna be in a situation where
Which is.
the first family that moves in is eligible. All of a sudden, something happens with the deed restrictions, somebody decides the next family isn't, and the city's trying to tell somebody they can't buy the home they were buying. Or sell the home. Or they have to sell it, but I think we wanna make sure that.
Or family
Board
member,
doesn't know
all
that.
kinds of things get very.
Because you can just sell it directly to a family member can inherit it if the person passes away, as long as they're still eligible as a family, so it would maybe potentially not be sold.
And it ends up being very,
Cause
That-
I
that's
think we
what
don't wanna
community land
be
trusts
in
get.
housing, we wanna be in loans,
Yeah, and
maybe,
as,
I don't know.
as our, former finance director always said this, we are not a bank. And she, no way does she want us to operate as such or have that much
Right.
administrative work placed on staff or placed on the shoulders of,
And it sounds like the recapture is a lot of administrative staff.
Yeah.
Any type of recapture is going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
for us and or NeighborWorks.
And
It's a lot of a lift, and so that's why,
no, if it's in the form of a kind of, that you somehow, if you could say, okay, we have 20,000 into this home and there's a deed restriction for that amount. And that it has, you could have a fixed interest rate, 2% or due on sale based on appreciation. Whether that's put in that construction or not. They just write you a check at closing. Some closing company, title company will call you and say, hey, we got this thing, but it has to be kind of an entity where they're gonna be there in 25 years, you know, so,
Right. Well, I know, John, you're in real estate, not a loan officer, but is that of much utility to you? Respect the homeowner.
It kind of depends. Yeah, it could be very impactful. That's the short answer. That's the longer term answer, the bigger answer is, how clever is your lender? I mean, 20 grand is the difference between getting it done and not getting it done. Ought you really be doing it anyway? That's a bigger sort of philosophical question.
Because that's.
I mean, I just stepped right in the middle of this.
no, but
So your comment is essentially, is that gap financing at that point?
Yeah, and you know, going back to your comment about what the finance director didn't want to see him become, which is some kind of revolving credit thing. Whether or not that's what you wanted to become isn't necessarily still a bad thing if you do have to become that, you know, given circumstance.
Functionally, it's like a RLF. Right now.
Right now, it does.
yeah, so what you would like, you want these funds to go to an entity that would do that, if it's
I'm just
community,
staff. I
if
don't
it's a
have-
public community land trust, we're assuming that's gonna still be in existence and that the land instruments, the deed restriction limit on
Protect
land
it.
trust, protect it, and that will come back. And they will be making,
The developer has to figure out how to pencil it out, not necessarily the homeowner,
Sure.
obviously, but, I don't have skin in the game, I'm just trying to help inform the conversation.
Well, what happens if a homeowner does figure it out and we ended up loaning money on a small project like an individual home?
Like a co-op has been one of the conversation pieces that we jumped into,
Sure.
co-op.
So we get to, we
but not.
help a family get into a house.
Mhm.
Okay, so ultimately, and maybe that's a good thing, since the parameters philosophically of what we're trying to do. It's all about affordable housing, right? And we got a family, it's in a house. What happens when they raise themselves out of the circumstance they started in, right?
good.
All of a sudden, now we've accomplished our mission. Now, all of a sudden, these people no longer qualify. Or would not qualify
No,
the
once
next time
you
around.
qualify, it's
No,
not-
I'm not saying, I'm saying, think about this.
Yeah.
Then they choose to sell their home. If there is deed restriction in place, it says, look, we paid for, at the beginning of this process, we paid for whatever it is, 18% of the value of this house, right? We should get 18% of the value of the house out of it when you are fortunate enough to sell it for.
Mhm.
And if that's 10 years from now, we get 18% of the value.
And that's your.
That's our,
Yeah.
that's our portion of the increase in the value.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why can't you write a deed restriction like that?
Oh, an attorney must have certainly that,
Right.
that's not.
But is that a bad thing? That at closing, we get 18% value back out of the house? As long as it's no lower than, because markets rise and fall, it's no lower than the money that we put into the.
And I think to your point, John, like, I don't believe anywhere in here I've seen what the deed restriction or the covenant would pay. Like, we're not defining it, obviously, a lawyer would have to, but
Sure.
like, we just say a deed restriction, and then we don't go into details in terms of what that deed restriction is like.
Well,
I
it
think
says
we may have, I think we may have
affordability,
broken
so they
through.
still
Wait,
income
wait.
eligible.
So we have a community land trust model. Could be one, or what we've discussed here is a non-home buyer assistance deed restriction. what's harder, if we're talking only about new construction or renovated or converted housing, it's harder to get at the value of the money that we're putting into the home, but if we put 20,000 in, I guess we're gonna be set, it's gonna be at the application, so if they're saying they're building these homes and said so much money, 20,000 represents this certain percentage of the home, and that same percentage would be what the equity share would be the repayment at the time of sale.
Because
the
right
arm's length
now,
sale.
it's just a construction loan to the developer and those
Okay.
funds come back in 2 years.
In 2 years. But you could have a lot of
So,
developers-
if you wanna do this, we
Yeah.
could totally add in something totally different, but right now,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
just a loan to a developer.
So
So
we could
I
keep
think
it
we
simple
decide
and just
if
say,
that's okay.
where
not
we-
okay,
where I
if
think
we
Kelly
wanna do
was
something
saying-
different.
we either just work with community land trusts or we don't, because otherwise it's too complicated for.
Well, so I found that document from Indiana Herald, and I just passed this to you, Chair. You can
And
scroll
I do
through it.
think we have like our 5-minute warning before we need to take a break. But I do feel like this is a really important discussion because I don't know that necessarily as staff would have a preference other than how we make it accountable with public funds and how we can track those with the least bit of
Oh, that
orders,
might be my
restrictions
phone.
on staff and hands on any kind of homeowner.
We'll start texting it back.
School year, I had to reset alarms on my phone, and so it's probably not to go get my file.
I was like, this is Kyle's pickup break time. But that comes back to how do you know, is it for the homeowner or is it
This
the
is
home
what-
that's created for the
this is what-
homeowner,
yeah.
right?
The commission historically has seen this before. It just seems a much stronger tool.
For this, what we're describing here, so we could just go with. We really aren't.
So we spent 20 minutes on this one.
So we,
You're hashing out very important things here.
so the
I should have brought snaps. for this
20,000
part.
is still the number we're working with, and that we're going with the community land trust, is that what people are for development of single family, that we need an entity that will be responsible for the future affordability, and the community land trust can do that. And then it may be Habitat.
Well, I think
I don't know how we would distinguish groups of like-minded people, friends.
Well, I mean,
joining
is an
together.
LLC any different than a developer in the minds of an applicant?
No, well, like say an LLC that's developing low-income housing tax credit. And by design, you must rent to the public. There's all kinds of protections. It's not,
But
Not
if you're buying, how would we see that as something different in the app? I'm throwing that out there as a discussion topic, like. If, April, nothing, remember, if April all of a sudden decides like, oh, I'm gonna form an LLC because individuals cannot apply, but no one has said if you like make a company, you can't apply. How is she different than like Dick Anderson? In the application here, could she build one and then they have built
Well,
six
I mean, it raises,
Dick and Mark
It's the
probably have
public.
to create a nonprofit.
it's the
But we don't
public.
require a nonprofit.
No, we're saying for-profit can participate in the city money. If
And I
it's-
only say that I don't
But
think Dick
the
Anderson
difference
doing
is-
this. I'm just
No,
saying.
but the can't, it's surprising.
I'm
It's
not saying
surprising.
that in any way.
The,
for the record.
No, but the problem is the public piece. That this should be open to the public, the benefit should be open to the public. And then it's, and so there's a certain comfort when it's, if it's kind of a small, self-serving circle that's not open to the public.
Do we have anything in here that protects that state? Something.
I'm sorry.
You know what I mean, like, just thinking about those sorts of things, like, people are being really creative right now with different ways to do housing, different ways to figure out multi-generational housing for their families. Just wanna make sure that whatever the board's thoughts are on some of those, if they should be there, are we putting in whatever protections we need, or are we making things totally open? I just wanna make sure
Well,
the board
that's the
feels
thing.
comfortable with this before going to the commission, where they may change, I mean, the commission could totally say, we don't wanna change any parts of the program. Right, and that's okay too.
So a definition of a community land trust is a nonprofit group that owns lands, create affordable housing, gardens, local business for the public good.
Yes.
Okay, so the public good part is what I'm talking about. So if you can't form a nonprofit. We were saying that for-profits are eligible for this funds, but you can't form a nonprofit and only serve your family. That's not a charity. That's called a family.
Just because I am my own favorite
But could
charity.
you form,
Yes, we may beg to differ, but.
but could you form a for-profit for your family?
Sure.
And then do this?
Family trust.
Family trust, you know, ranches, you know.
Yeah, but then would they still be able to do that? And then later put it in a land trust?
Well, community land trust, by definition, is a nonprofit.
And it's specific
Overall,
it's specific to each individual property being put in trust, right?
The trust owns the land, the individual buy or rent the home.
Create a trust for each parcel.
Yeah, so right now,
Only being approved.
Habitat has a community land trust that I think encompasses all of those things.
I think it's property specific, because at one point he was saying, when talking about the Redeemers project, that he was wanting to move away from CLTs and by deed restrictions, and then
Well, I
for
would say,
some properties, not necessarily that one, so I think he's vacillated, depending on the development, maybe, I'm not sure.
I would say,
I
anymore now, I don't know if he's, I would say it's been the last 3 years, something I've heard him say about, that they, whatever legal entity they currently are utilizing for, but they do have the ability to put, so it's not like they have to be co-joined or anything, that they have a way of bringing into a community land trust kind of a single parcel, a home like scattered site,
Yeah.
and then.
For instance, the home that they were gifted,
Mhm.
that had a single family home and a garage.
Yeah.
And then they placed it in a CLT if memory serves.
Yeah.
And then we have home turned the garage into an EU effectively, and then sold each as an individual residence.
I think they also built a carport, I think that's what I know.
What's that?
The carport.
They did what?
I think they also built like a carport or an additional garage, okay. Okay, I hate to stop this in the middle,
Okay.
but we do need to stop for a break at 3:10, it's 3:06.
And we come back with a commitment, and we're coming back at 3:30, and we're gonna.
I think you guys all deserve a break anyway.
Okay.
So-
We're gonna find a solution, Ollie.
Do we think we?
It exists.
No,
Some of them.
I don't know, I still don't know if we have any answer to this home ownership thing, but
So, Chair, I'm wondering, would it be an option to leave the single family home? When we come back from break, jump to the other changes that are the next, 8 pages or whatever it is. Look at those, make sure, okay, and then come back to the single, and so we know if there are any issues in the other parts, cause I still have, like section, page 19, section, 16, request for fund, I still feel like we heard a lot of back and forth about how and when the funds get released. I would love some clarity on the board's opinion on that before taking it back to the commission. That's a section that
so are we jumping in at 13? Or where?
I think if we could jump in at page 13, so immediately after single family, if we could jump in, that next section is 12, application submission, page 13. would that give everyone a little time to mull over, but still move forward and then come back? Is that hopeful?
I would agree with that.
So we don't run out of time, because then
And then
we'll
that
have
we'll
40
work through
minutes.
this, and hopefully we don't run into something.
Because at that point, we'll have about 40 minutes left.
Is the whole tax increment financing, why that's included here is always been in the.
We added it in because of the 10% set aside to make sure that an entity that applies for this knows they can also access that 10% housing set aside.
Within the tip district.
That's
But
the
in
housing
moments-
authority.
When we get there, we'll be like, whether that's. I think there's some confusion whether or not then that puts that into the process rather than from the TIF process, which is a different process. Okay, all right, let's do it.
Do you want to feel okay?
Yeah, okay.
And now that John is here, if it takes a few more minutes for pickup, we will still have a quorum, so don't race there.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, that's correct.
So we'll be okay, so.
We're coming back at
What's
three.
on page? Page 13. And, so we can try to move through these. More administrative.
Don't worry about it, John, we know you're here, so.
So this says that each year, a specific funding schedule and application will be published in advance of that application fee date. Doesn't specify. You know, how long in advance or, you know, okay,
And
okay,
I think that's probably, that's.
good thing,
but,
yeah,
yeah.
finding the perfect time. So that,
The first
can
section.
someone, the first section on 14, the red, someone, it's a little confusing to me.
So Chair, there was, discussion. Probably your meeting, like a year ago, as we started opening this up, there was discussion that. Currently it read, non-refundable application fee of $200 is due upon application submission. There was some discussion about. If an application actually goes through, gets funded. Whether that application fee should be refunded so that it's like not more funds coming in. There's also been some question from members of the public that potentially that $200 goes toward the costs of NeighborWorks, which is the cost for underwriting whether or not something is funded. There was some staff that wanted to refund those funds. I suspect it maybe, I don't know exactly why, but I suspect it had something to do with, you know, reducing any sort of administrative fee entity. We have received comment from the public as well that $200 is,
Where is
significantly
public-
less.
in public health from?
Well, because any version of this is on the website for every one of your meetings as a meeting material, members who couldn't attend the meetings have started. Members of the public have sent information to us with questions, also, versions of this, it's on the, agenda for the administrative meetings when I needed to go and give updates to them on where the process was. All of those, things that a commissioner would see are available to the public, so we've had questions or comments, mostly what we heard was that it should stay non-refundable.
I think that makes sense.
I think that makes sense. So it's an application fee. That
Mhm.
$200 for something like this would be very, very low. And that's, it's really, it doesn't really even begin to capture the cost of staff dealing with these
Mhm.
issues. So, it just really is just kind of you know, provide somewhat of a threshold that you're serious about submitting an application. I think probably some of the comments would be like, oh, I need that housing, I have to put in $200 to the applicant. I don't think it's probably fully understanding what is involved. Certainly, it doesn't involve people who would benefit from the housing having to pay $200 application fees, which, application fees, unfortunately, in the rental world is something more common, we're getting taken advantage of, but that's not what we're talking about here, so. What do people think? Should we
Have no problem.
keep it $200, a non-refundable application fee, $200 due upon the application submission period?
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, like I said, the way we're rewriting this is aimed at development. Right?
Yeah.
$200, it's not even a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
It's like an atom in, the bucket.
Well, and
I would-
if it's, I mean, $200 is, it's, to my mind anyway, it's just enough money to make sure that we're taking the process seriously
Yeah.
enough not to waste our time
Exactly.
with an application that's frivolous enough.
And again, some of that fee goes towards actually the actual underwriting that we are having to pay another one for, so.
Lots of it would be, plenty of non-refundable application fees based on the amount of the ask, like 1%, almost like an origination fee, but 200, I didn't think even 500 would be reasonable, but 200 shouldn't be a barrier for anyone. Okay,
So
We
strike the
agree.
proposed
Strike.
language.
yeah, right, proposed language.
Well, should we maybe consider leaving the last sentence in terms of if they are bringing,
Yes.
changes
Yeah.
back to the commission,
Yeah,
to
that's-
charge them
yeah.
again,
Yeah.
that's making us spend more time on it.
Because that becomes, would be really burdensome if, oh, no, it changed, well, it's a new application, so, okay, yeah, good
Okay.
pickup,
So
right?
keep the last sentence,
Yeah.
in the event that it has to go back to underwriting. We'll go back to-
Scratch the first sentence, okay,
Thank you.
nice. All right,
As I mentioned, there have been lots of different ideas floated, which is why we want to make sure everybody has a chance to really look at them and think about the impacts.
Where did the pre-application meeting, come from?
So where are you going? The pre-application part, I think it had to do with consistency among programs and make sure nobody's paying $200 for something that would need to be eligible.
We have received applications, at least one, that was fully ineligible for program funding, and it was for about $200,000. And so it's more of a sort of just as we do with our tax income financing applications. We need that from first just to talk to the prospective applicant to ensure that what they're actually proposing meets eligibility requirements. That how to get into, we don't know, there's no desire from staff to obviously waste the board's time. Then by extension, the commission with that project that. Not required for the program.
Or that with a little bit of assistance ahead of time could.
Sure,
Mm.
or that.
Maybe a little bit like pre-development meetings in other parts of our department where you kind of come and talk ahead of time before.
It's a no cost for thing, because again, we've been hit with at least one application, and just, we're not even nowhere.
so that's, I think, we're all in agreement on that aspect, but what it doesn't say then is where you actually submit the application once approved through the,
Or how to schedule a pre-application meeting?
yeah.
I think it comes down in the board.
Sarah is back on, so let me get her.
Hi, Sarah.
Thought we had it in the board, but, welcome back, Sarah.
Sorry, it took me a minute. My internet was not cooperating, but we're good.
All right. What section, just to catch Sarah up?
Page 14, section 13.
I mean, we can expressly say that we submitted electronically to the city housing coordinator, as an to that effect. But I think that's probably assumed by the following sentence, it says in first section, that person anyway.
You have
And her
a
successor.
portal or something?
No.
No?
It used to say that, and we took it out because we don't, I believe that the,
We can externally share our OneDrive folders.
I think it's on like page 2 or 3.
So can I, like, the Dropbox it to me? No?
Sorry, I know it's
You can flash drive, they can email it.
So we'll keep it small.
It just has to be in an electronic format.
So where would we submit, applications will be submitted electronically to the,
Housing coordinator?
I'm sorry, I know it's in one, I think it's in a different.
is it to the housing coordinator?
Okay, so it says applications will be submitted electronically. Think we didn't write it in here, but the intent was like, when you go to the website to see it, it will tell you how to do it. But we could say to, the housing coordinator. Or submit it electronically.
This isn't
Is there
the
a-
application guideline anyway, this is the regulation that runs what you do, and so how you want people to apply really isn't actually gonna have to be in this document.
But that's
It's gonna be in
what
the application.
applications will be submitted electronically. A pre-application is required. Prior to, okay.
And we're not, yeah, I mean, my point is, we're not gonna hand this to a developer and say, follow these rules. This is all you get. You're gonna give them something that tells them how to do all this stuff, right?
Once this goes to the commission and everybody has set up their intent, we then have to rewrite the application.
Yeah, okay, well, you'll have an application.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
we're-
there's an application that exists, the commission has to approve it, but we have to change it, we can't change it till we know what the intent is.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So we're all fine with that requirement of pre-app and contact. The application will have more detail.
Sort
Now
of
that-
treating it as a courtesy.
Now, the next section, you got a lot of scratching out, so you go A, B, C. Application review, so,
Housing coordinator, pre-app meeting conducted to assess how to develop. Advisory board.
okay. Review of applicant.
So we crossed out that the advisory board reviews it. And made that the next step, like first there's the pre-meeting to make sure they're okay, so that we know then that it would come to the board.
Yeah.
So it is a cross out, but it just got moved to the next.
If I'm putting in an application, do I feel like I'm doing a meeting for the meeting?
The pre-application,
Right, we do a pre-application meeting and then we present to the board and city staff.
I think the pre-application is to keep them from paying $200 for something that would immediately be a no and never go anywhere.
From what I see
And
now,
how to help them get to yes for eligibility.
yeah, the pre-application meeting is just with the housing coordinator, right? So that's just, you know, to use blunt words, wasting one person's time instead of all of our time, right?
But it's a technical system, it's. It helps, but it is a requirement, so we have to do, we need to allow enough time.
We made it a requirement sort of just as a courtesy to an applicant. To save them the whole process for something that maybe somehow they didn't read the eligibility and still fell down the application.
Well, it
Or to
almost, you would,
save your time as the board.
I mean, you would, it wouldn't even need to have a completed application at that stage, but they would sit down, right?
Yeah, they would not complete, they would not submit one.
They would submit one, they would meet with you and lay out. There would need to be enough.
Because it's prior to submission, so it would be before that, before application
Yeah.
date.
But it, so you would need to build that into the process enough time to do that.
These can happen informally and months in advance of a submission, otherwise it's not.
We just don't want people.
It's not a formal thing.
You know,
Or we're at the actual presentation to us and to staff is a
So,
formal.
so it's, I mean,
meeting
it's,
that's public.
so are we making a requirement? If it's a requirement, then everyone has to do it, and then you need to have enough time in advance of the actual application process to do that.
It's not vetting the quality of what they submit, it's vetting the proposal.
Yeah, just to make sure they're, and you point out just the factual kind of, well, this isn't really what we,
Yes, so that we don't get another $300,000 PAR request.
yeah.
this is what this is what is eligible, this is what is
Multi-site,
not.
300.
Ah,
It's not pre-evaluating their actual application, because that would be appropriate, it's just, does their idea meet the requirements of the program? Before they pay a fee, and then that fee. Is the project eligible for the program? And my guess is that would likely have additional staff there, potentially. To help them. Like you said, Sheriff's technical assistance.
Alright, and then, so then they submit it electronically. Staff will prepare and distribute. So the advisory board review of applications will be, individually will be reviewing the applications. We then, applicants would present to the advisory board and city staff together. And then we would have meetings to make a recommendation to the city commission. And then the city commission makes final awarded funding decisions.
Cause 2 got crossed out because it became C, it didn't
Yeah,
remove
right.
that step for you, it just moved it in the. Format.
And, everyone find all that?
Yeah.
Okay, alright. And then the rest. Preliminary letter of commitment. And then, we're gonna hold, the thing that the city will may hold 100,000 in reserve. Everything else is, we kind of get rid of the idea that this fund might go to housing related emergencies, like a planning effort or something.
Sarah, I do think we did receive some information that. When you go back and look at the original resolution as well, at one point, this $100,000 was more for, held in reserve for opportunities, which we wondered if that had to do with something outside of a funding cycle came up and somebody was like, oh, we need a match, and this is a thing that's a short-term deal. But then it became housing related emergencies, and I know the board has had discussions about what would that be. And so then it's like, well, what is that $100,000 held in reserve for? It is in the resolution.
Requests that we received for people thinking that it could be used for certain emergencies were effectively for deployment maintenance. Does that constitute an emergency?
We have heard murmurings of entities that might want to ask for this for an actual, damage to the property that is keeping them from housing. We got that email yesterday. So I think figuring out what your reserve might be for, could be very helpful.
I mean, I'm in agreement with you. I don't see a reason why you would need to define the reason you're keeping $100,000 in reserve. I mean, that, more or less is up to the city to, maintain the fund itself as well as, just, or, emergencies or anything else that might be affordable housing related. It gives the city the, what's the word I'm looking for? The initiative, the onus to be able to use that funding as long as it's within, of course, the intention of the fund.
Have you already discussed, and I apologize if you're not having been to the earlier meetings with you folks, but have you already talked about the idea of holding a greater sum in reserve that's stock for the sustainability of the fund altogether?
There's the discussion that it's called a trust, but it's not a trust, and that it's going to be the affordable housing fund. And potentially that is not going to happen.
Okay, great.
Or that it
we had lengthy conversations, and if it was a trust, we'd be supportive of the trust if this city came up with like 100 times the money. It was actually, it would be throwing off, yeah, I mean, we could
Perfect.
yeah.
Just had to make
But
sure
if
that
we take out the part in red and it just says the funds not awarded in the current cycle will be made available. However, 100,000 will be held in reserve. Is that 100,000 every cycle?
No,
And
it
if we
says-
take out the red, then we don't say who has the authority to spend it, or if it now
It
can no
may
longer
be,
be
it's a
spent.
may, right, because they're saying they may hold. There's a few things in here,
Mhm.
funds not awarded, so the commission doesn't have to award all the funds.
Mhm.
And, it depends on the applications, and do they wanna do that, and whether or not they will hold funds in reserve, maybe up to $100,000 for. And the commission can do whatever they want against these funds,
Plus, I don't read it as 100,000 per cycle, yeah, we have one fund.
Yeah.
$100,000 in that fund.
Is it to any end other than just keeping it in reserve, or was it for a discrete purpose, for off-cycle things?
And then clearly by saying housing related emergencies has led to people's
Confusion.
confusion and people getting ready to have housing emergencies. Yeah.
I'm getting ready for it.
Yeah.
But if we take it out unanticipated housing related emergencies, does that $100,000, which is currently held in reserve, so we do have it set aside currently. If someone calls up tomorrow and says, I'd like that $100,000, period. What are the parameters for yes or no? Does the commission, is that sort of a fund the commission can use for something? Cause then it doesn't say any restrictions on what it would or wouldn't be for, or who decides. If the board decides,
Is it generally just for keeping
Still
Hunter
citizen.
paid all the time?
or is
Well-
it there in case we need to pay NeighborWorks for something extra, or?
I think it's there in case, some other tenant at Fire Tower Apartments sets a kitchen fire and 12 units have to get smoke damage mitigation before they can occupy it.
So what
Well,
if
they don't
there's
have
an
that money,
entity
but
that
they have
has?
insurance.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the kind of thing in my head, it's like, oh, emergency is something that you cannot foresee, cannot plan
and
for.
HUD disaster planning, which is really, actually very good, but the primary point was, we're not gonna help you. They said, you can turn to, they said you can go to your, well, we did talk a lot about insurance, but they said, well, you can contact your local nonprofits. I'm like, wow, yeah,
Oh,
it's like,
okay.
it's just a switching, the whole dynamic was very interesting, the way they switched, and said, yep, we're not gonna help you.
Wow.
But we only have so much time, so we're good, we're just gonna leave it. That's up to the thing, we don't have to say what the 100,000 is for, they may hold money in reserve, that's completely up to
Just
the.
wanna make
the
sure if
city
you wanna say or not.
Yeah.
Do you wanna keep it May or shall?
May.
I mean, that gives us the most flexibility,
Yeah.
up to May, and
Yeah.
really, the number
Yeah.
is kind of.
We don't have to.
We're just giving ourselves the flexibility to it.
So always, next section, and this is all the second choice, the commission. Okay. Redirecting folks to the red, directional. This section will help the fund.
That's the part I would like your community on. We had a lot of different, having ideas. We're talking about the red section in 15, that refers to a whole new section, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on page. What we wanna know, we had a lot of back and forth with different people. Suggesting things like, is this fund for all of your attorney fees, or is this fund for paying all your closing costs on your other loans, or is it only for buying doors and windows? At what point? Is it just, can it just be flexible, and can we just maybe release the full million at the time of closing, and then they don't have to ask for multiple different, release of funds, cause originally it was that could be asked for once per month. And then there was discussion about maybe we just release it all at the time the loan closes, and then it is there for an entity to use only for eligible expenses, but at that point, the funds are released, so either they used it eligible or not.
I mean, I think a
And
lot,
take
a
out
lot
all
of
the
this kind of fund would be helpful at the beginning of a project. And you don't wanna just release it, throw them the park in the bank, that they would, so any release of funds will be, this will be used for specific purposes. It's not the general release of funds, it's for specific purposes, but staging it out, it's not as helpful. It's not as helpful, I think, than it. And maybe for some folks, they might wanna stage it over the life of the project, but for others, it's like, you come in before your other money,
We wanna make,
especially on the construction loan.
Yeah, I feel like the monthly is probably cleaner and simpler. And, or I would say it should be one or the other.
One or the other,
Either the added portion, the red portion of 25%. Either that, or the once per month that you're saying above it. And I think once per month is probably a good thing. I don't see any reason to. I just feel like that's gonna be confusing or difficult to administer for the applicant.
but you could come in the first month and ask for all the funds if you have eligible expenses.
I would say, as an example, that is what happened with the first one, if they came in with over $1 million worth of eligible expenses and said, we have shown with our supporting documentation, and we said, yes, you have, here you go. I think the concern is not forcing them to take the full amount at once, because then they're paying interest on it.
Right.
But also not just getting it right away because it's the cheapest money and then not using it yet
Right.
for eligible expenses till later.
No, there has
So
to be
maybe
eligible-
leaving the black how it totally was
Yeah.
and not having any of the other parts. But also not requiring it all to necessarily come at once, but allowing it all to, if that's what's best for the project.
I didn't intend to jump ahead from page 15 to page 19.
But
What I was doing was on page 15, saying, I
Right,
think that the language is very clear.
no, so that
It
makes,
should be the
makes
section
sense.
number,
Right.
then the colon, and then request for funds, and then a comma.
Oh, I think
Okay.
it's because we didn't,
We didn't know that.
We didn't-
had-
That's all I was talking
We
about.
created a new change.
oh, I
So-
think it's because depending on which sections,
So-
they take out the section.
Yeah, the numbers are changed. I want a number there.
Let's do the
You're gonna
page
want a
19.
comment.
While we're there, let's
Right,
fix it.
yeah,
So
one of those
we're
19.
gonna maintain the original language up top, and we're gonna say that, so it's just a monthly draw cycle. Or rather, and we're gonna scratch the red below, but can we say that the applicant will suggest a draw schedule? It doesn't necessarily need to be in the application, which would seem to be premature, but the applicant would, or the, how do we refer the person that now that they've been awarded the fund, what is it? The project will submit, the awardee will submit a proposed draw schedule.
I don't know. Their roles and the schedule, but we will put it in whatever to use a distribution agreement for these funds once the resolution is passed. How did that happen the last time?
They
It's
just
in
had
the
a loan
that's in the-
document,
Oh, it's in the one doc.
and then they did like a request for funds for, that I stole from.
But certain things would need to be, probably should be, verified, so the documents, the documentation submittal for, but it's just not.
The
Yeah,
invoice.
yeah,
the
yeah,
business bid,
yeah, exactly.
To make sure that they actually
Yeah.
had enough and that they had
Yeah.
all their.
For eligible expenses, and then, but that, it's probably useful for US city staff to know what the draw schedule is gonna look like, if you're gonna have to respond to it.
Finance needs to know that
Well, because every time,
a lot of work.
part of the thought is if they take all the funds up front, it doesn't change anything. If every time they do a draw, that changes their payment.
Mhm.
which means it has to all be recalculated, new invoices and changes their payments,
Mhm.
through finance, so that was part of the thought was if it all goes at once, then the payment is the same no matter what. If they're doing interest only on the construction part, maybe that is less important than if they're also trying to do principal when the principal continues to change. Right?
Well, if
They're
you're doing permanent finances, it's for the closing, so you're not doing
Right.
grants on that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So maybe we need to actually define the release of funds for, say, the construction loans
Versus.
versus the fixed term loan. Depending on how we're loaning it out too. Because we do have multiple options, at least in the multifamily, housing section for either a construction cost or a fixed term loan. And I mean, as we're discussing, there's definitely different consequences for each loan in terms of how we're distributing.
Cause I do think maybe the intent was always that no applicant would come in not trying to do both paired together, right? Like any entity that comes in is gonna do construction and then convert, but it doesn't say you have to.
Except for if they're using the funds forward for acquisition, probably, right?
Like if they're just using it for land acquisition, we probably are not gonna roll it over to a fixed.
So, I mean, that actually gets at our comment because a construction loan is a specific thing. That's, doesn't necessarily, construction loan doesn't do for land acquisition.
No.
There's pre-construction loan.
You know,
Is it important for it to be in this document? In other words, this isn't, is this outside the purview of what we do as an advisory committee? The city is the one who has to determine how they're gonna actually distribute and collect. And bill
You're right.
any of the money. I'm not
So you
sure
could
it's
scratch
really
the whole
red.
red, and then that's just saying that,
That's a, you're
that's
just,
that there will be.
Yeah.
Um,
we'll just dump it back in the middle. It's your
well,
problem.
we are trying to define expectations and, you know,
Well, it's,
helping, you know, provide
And
feedback.
and that's the other side of the coin, and I got no problem with that.
there's some language in that thing that's for eligible expenses, that it's not like they can just, they're gonna award the funds, they can, and then you'll develop the.
And that's kind of what I was thinking too, like somewhere maybe in that first sentence, city will release funds on an as-needed basis during the course of the project, probably maybe, we had a line saying, you know, with appropriate, documentation of, the funding needed.
Maybe where it has in parentheses, upon receipt of a request for funds and accompanying
Oh,
supporting documentation showing eligible expenses.
yes, there you go, Sean,
Or something of that nature, would that help?
That's perfect.
Or let's see, documentation
Yeah,
demonstrating eligible expenses, would that, protect it, but then not make it too rigid
And then get rid of the bottom part.
and get rid of the red part?
Yeah.
Okay,
All right, we have a limited time here, so back to page 15.
so then back to page 15, do we need to get rid of red or should we keep it and then once we have an appropriate section number, add the number?
Add the number, is my opinion.
Yeah,
But keep the red?
keep the red. Yeah. All right, advisory board. I think
One change in code 16, which I think we can agree on the, grammar of it.
okay, I don't know. Probably considered by first looking at the reasonable and underwriting plan for consistent first document. And probably two. Yeah. Nothing there. Anything at 16, so we're good. We're good. We now on 17.
we added in today, we provide proof of insurance, and then later added in when their reports are due, we don't want them back to do one like the day after they close.
Is general considerations just duplicating our eligibility?
Sorry, general considerations.
General considerations seems like it's a fair duplication of
Which
eligibility. Sorry, page 19.
Okay.
Oh, I'm
Well, let's
sorry,
go
we're on
back.
page
Yeah,
17.
17, okay. We jumped back.
We went back.
We went.
Oh, backwards.
We
go
went
forward.
over the okay.
We paid-
Okay. So okay. The additional quarterly report things, the kind of. With the insurance accords for real property, it's that covers everything. We're talking about liability, we're talking about builder's risk and that. So is that appropriate?
I don't know who came up with that particular
It
language.
was, yeah,
It could just be the insurance accords full stop.
insurance accords, are we requiring any level of insurance coverages? You know, like finance or standard?
That's the new one, isn't it? I'm used to that being contained in our city contract.
Yeah,
That requires certain levels of.
so, yeah, I would just say that it should be a minimum level of insurance, you could meet this requirement, and it's very minimal insurance, and not a smart idea, but $2 million.
I think it must be a little document, but I cannot tell you exactly what else in it right now.
I would say if it's in the loan document, it doesn't need to be there.
So this is at the time of project completion.
Cause first it's at the time of loan close prior to disbursement of funds, you have to show proof of
But
insurance
so
on the
before
property.
getting
and
the money,
then
there needs to
closure.
be proof of insurance if the
Mhm.
project's underway. No one, there couldn't be a project underway without insurance, but different, there's a lot of contractors that are flying by the seat of their pants with very little insurance coverage versus.
Right. I mean, the state requires that you have them as an additional insured property on all of those.
Yeah, so additional
Ones in
insurance and
insurance.
all that kind of language is what I'm used to seeing. Tells you exactly.
So
So,
you're gonna have a different insurance policy while you're building your project
Mhm.
after you're done.
Right.
So you require, getting the, copy, the city needs a copy of the.
the proof of insurance held on real property. Proof on real funding clients. You need certificates of insurance in the city, and everybody. I mean, it's like, cause when if something goes wrong,
Not
Well,
on completion of project.
not completion of project, but we also don't define it in that earlier. On 17, we don't say what insurance or what level of insurance.
Contract is gonna specify that.
The contract will
You just
specify.
put it in the loan document, I think
Okay.
it's just you can't get any
But-
funds before you show that the property is insured.
Okay. So that will be taken care of in there.
So
Okay,
put it in the loan. I'm sure it's in the loan.
so we don't have to worry about that. That will all be taken care of in the loan
His
document.
neighbor, so we'll have to double check.
We'll check that. And if it is contained in the loan documents, if we suspect, we can add language to say proof of insurance held on real property, which can apply as stated in.
But I would use the same language we have in other contracts that if you think, well, we're just giving you money, something goes wrong, we'll come after everybody.
Why tax CDBG your home?
No, that's true, but I'll come after you. No good deed goes unpunished.
I guess I don't understand why it's at the time of project completion. Shouldn't it be initiation?
It's both.
It's both, so it's at the, at the time that you're signing the loan documents and the project is underway and then upon completion.
When they complete, then they're gonna have to get new insurance.
Because first it's an empty lot and then it's a lot with a building.
And it's
I think
liability
was
or
the
construction.
intent.
There probably should be specific. And that'll be a loan fund, specific type of insurance. So it should be something, proof of insurance as determined in the loan documents. So you don't have to express it in here, but, except the only thing that's important for the applicant is that they have the ability to get insurance. It's, can help separate out certain actors. All right, so we jumped.
One time thing is I noticed in this paragraph, that ongoing compliance with record keeping or something on. I think this is the first time and maybe the only time I've seen the use of recipients. And I think for consistency, we're calling them awardees or, we discussed that a little bit, but
Awardees.
award.
Awardees, okay.
Boyardee. And here, I guess it is throughout, but I just wonder if we're using the same terminology throughout, and I haven't been tracking it, but recipients caught that, but I don't know that I've seen it.
I mean, at the very least, you know, we do need recipients, so. Wondering if we should just make,
Like go with,
further specify saying loan recipient.
and just go with recipients throughout.
Yeah, maybe,
I think because it has not been determined if loans or grants or both exist in this program. So awardees would be the better option to cover both.
Mhm.
Right, because there were grants in here, the proposal is maybe not to do that, but that's something you all have to decide and then the commission has to vote on as well. So that's why I think it wouldn't necessarily say loan yet in the event that grant still exists.
Then it really doesn't address what we do for homeowners.
Well,
We'll
I
just
think the
unstart-
implication there,
Huh?
not to rehash it at this particular moment, but if it's a CLT,
It's
Cut and dry.
perpetuity, okay.
this is solely on rental projects,
Mm-hmm.
so that, just like we, again, do with those grant programs that the state. We like how that they're providing the necessary filings.
And then you can actually submit those.
Yeah.
So yes, I think recipient hasn't been there before, but until we know which types of entities could be a recipient, I don't know if changing recipient to awardee makes it any more or less. Clear.
Recipients can be loan, grants,
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, I'm not against that.
and honestly, isn't relatively,
Just
I
say
think
fund-
it is
just
relatively
say fund-
consistent,
just-
at least in terms of post-loan, their recipients,
Yeah.
before we refer to them as applicants, right?
And I think that's,
So I think that's
Okay.
appropriate, yeah.
Yeah,
I
should
think
it
it
say-
is so consistent.
Do you want to just say funding recipients?
Honestly, at this point, I would just
Okay.
keep it as recipients.
Agreed.
Great. I don't know how previously things like the tri-county housing development, the growth policy, that stuff made it under the general consideration section for compliance. with applicable rights and things. That's just me.
I think,
With my plan
I think,
on
I think
it.
it was the idea that the project would be consistent with documents, meeting the, and that, you know, that a project, you know, the Tri-County housing would identify certain types of housing that we needed the growth policy that you wouldn't want a project to come in that has.
But not-
using-
I just said it's not regulatory.
Right, the other things are, I think that's fine, Jim. Anyone have any problem getting rid of that? The language, no, that one.
no, and again, I feel like it, duplicates quite a bit of the eligibility pieces at the beginning.
You saw it involvement when it says original effective.
What's that?
You saw it as involvement, it says original.
Yeah.
also do a little taking on that. Earlier in the document, I noticed there were certain subsections that had an A prefix. And then later in the document, you don't continue B, C, or E under that section, such as section 10.
What page?
Page 7. Multifamily rental,
Um,
new subsection, the first subsection is A, rent limits, and then you go into finance construction requirements, and it does not contain the same format, or in the same vein, I think the next section is the same. Yeah, single family dwelling unit developments, A cost limits,
yeah,
and then we drop the format. Again, nitpicking on format.
There was a
Rather than
lot of
adding
mysterious
these,
wording
just
in
dump
that.
it.
I
We
would
had
just dump it
to-
into- yeah.
No, that's why we need help with.
Yeah. Maybe it's a good one. And then
Yeah.
and then you start page, right? And it comes up again on page 15.
Yeah, I think we had to rebuild. So somebody manually formatted the original document, and so Anna and I started to lose our mind. So we kept the same like subsection, like that stylistically, we kept it consistent with what was there before, so as to not throw everybody off, I think, or yourselves in the commission. But yes, if we some glares and things like that, that we corrected, we should know. You stare at a document for too long.
You missed, like, you missed the typos and you missed the, right?
And do whatever makes.
nose line to.
So then that would be page 19, so general considerations, but you're right. Yes.
Yeah, not
Um,
the use of the tax increment financing, because it would just be its own subsection. So it has
And
to-
so, the tax increment financing portion went from being a bullet point under general consideration, talking about the 10% and where that resolution came from. And became its own, because it's specific to the housing set aside.
But
There
it's
has
real
been
clear that
discussion.
it's separate process and that, but it can be used in conjunction, for leverage.
And that it's the Helena Urban Renewal TIF Advisory Board makes the decision, but it talks about how you can and can't use it in conjunction with trust funds.
So does the TIF advisory board make the funding decisions again?
For the funds that are not, that are from their 10% set aside.
Right, so the city commission doesn't have a role
We do, we do. So they're just an advisory board like yourselves,
there. Okay.
for the
No.
funds within their sort of. So they make a recommendation to the commission still, or if you awarded those monies, if they can be used a little more flexibly than the other TIF funds that are not restricted for housing activities. Meaning as you get property into those districts, and maybe that's probably a little bit easy to process, but I promise it would be great.
All right. Well, let's, does anyone have
That'd be great.
any concerns about the section B tax increment financing request? I think it does add some useful information.
You're just trying to create sideboards, and I want us to note really quickly, just for everybody's education, that I recently learned how the city of Missoula are handling this because of how. I'm not gonna get into it too extensively, you guys have better things to focus your attention on, but basically state law for TIF doesn't define what workforce housing is. So they have to prepare themselves on how, what is it, affordable housing? They get a
That was a
definition,
bill.
it was a bill, there was a separate bill, 819. That sound right? That defined it as, what was it, 60 to 140% of the NMI? Some really broad,
That's, yeah, that homeowner.
yeah, so that's how Missoula are handling that, because of that, state law doesn't otherwise protect that. It just says workforce housing is infrastructure, and therefore can be funded with dollars, it's like nothing down that, doesn't define it.
But
So we'll
that's
see what happens
different than our
coming
10%
session.
set aside.
And ours says affordable housing.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah.
Which
We
is
just
defined.
define ours.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Mm.
funny, I don't want you to stress out too much about it.
That's fine.
Basically what it means, so you can go in conjunction, here's how you use it, but you can't use it. You can't use the city's TIF funds as match for the trust fund.
That's good question. All right, so we jumped. Do we call it good or we jump back to the, anyone have any fresh epiphanies? Everyone's helpful. On the homework.
On page 20, yes, where was
So page 11, is that what you're
Yeah.
kind of going back to?
You got any,
I have a question.
mhm,
Could theoretically a co-op form a land trust?
mhm.
100%.
Does that change anything?
No, it's that it's a public,
So if we require a land trust,
like community land trust, yeah.
and to your point, me and my brother form a land trust for our condo,
And it's not a community land trust.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. So this isn't to like, so, you know, I think some ranches are probably developed through some sort of land trust, private land trust, that's a private land trust, is what you're describing.
That
So
is
a community land trust is, has a public,
a community land trust.
Public good.
You're thinking about like the work that PPLT does with their.
yeah, I mean, you can do land trust.
They're different legal.
You can have community land trusts that, what's in a community land trust, so they're not exclusively used for housing. They can be used for, you know, open space, they use it for not, we're using stuff like that. But what's in a community land trust, public good is the distinguishing factor. And so what you're describing is you and your brother, that's not for the public. You know, it may be good, not to say it might be a great idea, but that's not, you're kind of a private activity that you're doing. Now, the community land trust is doing this not for themselves, but for the community. And so people needing to buy a home, affordable home, can have an opportunity to apply and be a part of that, right? I mean, this isn't, I don't know, I don't think we address it. I mean, but you're saying you're getting all kinds of interest of people coming in who wanting a piece of this, that are just kind of, they have their own little private interest. So,
And we don't know if they can or related to it.
So just for people's education, beyond what Michael shared, the Trust Montana website, because they're the biggest group for the only in the state really for establishing CLCs. They work to build a permanently affordable stock of ag properties, commercial spaces, and quality housing. So, I guess in some respects, maybe some of it's similar to conservation easements that we're talking about, just other things that really stay, I think, well to me for another similar question. Just assuring the permanent affordability of that product.
so does the city care if the funds are being used just for the purpose of saying single family or a closed set, that there isn't an open public opportunity? In my mind, I mean, just the way generally that it's, so if we don't care about that for, I mean, can this be built, can we free association, we can just build, we're gonna build a co-op for people we say can live in. You can get on the ground floor. I mean, usually the, in housing, it's anyone who applies who is eligible can be reviewed and you can be denied for different reasonable purposes, but
I think so long as the people are going through all the legal steps to actually create a community land trust, we probably don't need to stress too much.
Got
That is my
yeah.
thought.
Is
I
it-
am not an attorney. I'm not.
right, okay. So it's a community land trust.
But it could be, I mean, you can't, with the, oh my goodness, what is the term for the, mobile home parks? The
Resident
resident
communities.
owned, yeah, resident owned communities functionally in that favor, similar to the CLT.
They own their trailer, their manufactured home, but they don't own the land.
So,
But they now pay rent to themselves as a collective group instead of an outside.
Right. Right.
so it's not a CLT, but it's, I mean,
But it's, and they're not nonprofit. A number of the early ones were nonprofit, but the Fed stops. Granting it's become very difficult to, with the Feds to approve of housing nonprofit.
I don't know if people have watched that Tom, it's still pretty much on for John Oliver's.
Yeah, about the manufactured housing,
To extend that analogy, if a mobile home park formed a community land trust and wanted to, I don't know, do some work and apply for this fund, would that be eligible?
If they do new construction or conversion.
Also understand there are other
Maybe.
funding sources like CDBG programs like the system.
Yeah.
With the preservation. Yeah.
So, but a resident owned community, I guess, to your point, you're saying it could be, it could be a very narrow, just as it's a resident owned community of family members.
Probably
That's
muddy
two
the
different-
waters by bringing up far those things, I'm sorry.
What's it?
But I think it's
Money
hard
for
to
us,
think
like,
about it,
yeah.
like, would they be an eligible applicant? Have we?
Yeah, no,
For
I
land
think we saw that.
acquisition, so that they're no
Well, I
longer.
think we definitely, because we really haven't seen it
land
happen yet.
acquisitions?
We haven't seen it yet here, but all over the state, people show up and we're buying out I always think of, what's the one on the way to Archie Bray? Beautiful manufactured. Someone comes in and scoops that up. And
Or even just talking about the ones behind Pizza Hut.
Mhm.
The ones behind Pizza Hut on the east side of town.
yeah, and then, you're just gone, you get 60 days and you can't move your trailer, and you don't really move, and then you're lost, and so, there's some efforts to put some notice requirements and things on that kind of deal. It's on the legislature, so. I mean, a resident-owned community is really a co-op. That functions, that's also has aspects of the community land trust.
So it looks like we have a
A
minute
minute.
before Riley
Good.
has to leave.
Okay, all right, so are we gonna land on the community land trust as our home ownership structure that we're a preference? Yes, no, or we're gonna leave it?
If it's helpful as this is presented to the commission, once it's in a more final draft form with your comments incorporated, we can provide again, since there are new commissioners, that document that I just want you guys to review. Sorry, Sarah, you didn't speak. That was from staff at Trust Montana, kind of breaking down the differences between restricted versus CLT held properties. So,
And that's why we landed on that for this particular, for the new construction or renovation or, conversion.
if it's
For
when you
ownership.
deem it's appropriate to move in the direction of promoting CLTs versus anything other means of assuring affordability.
And that can be standard site, it doesn't mean that they all have to be, that we're not building contiguous, right? So as long as that's. And that
As long as there's a minimum of three.
Yeah.
So, but the whole question of the limitations on public good becomes. It's a public good, anytime families are able to buy a house, so that's a public good, I guess, but I don't think I don't think it's viewed to be a vehicle for strictly private, limited access. It's
No, just because we believe in the idea of home ownership for more people doesn't mean that it all rises to a level of needing public support.
But, so I mean, this idea that, you know, three family members or three close friends put a project together, and they say, we're forming a community land trust or land trust, and it's gonna be deed restricted, but it can't be sold. And it's only for, but it's a closed environment, it's only gonna benefit those three families.
Yeah, but if that's the case, it already doesn't meet other eligibilities.
But what if
It's
they
not.
meet income and everything else?
Income and everything else.
I think running that risk and making sure to include things like trailers.
Right.
I don't know, I mean. I'm sort of the mind right now that if we leave it in, it will rope in more important stuff, you know.
Okay.
With the. Oh, not.
Wait, what, leave what in it, community land trust?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
So we will accept. And there's some ambiguity of other types of deed restriction will work, we'll just leave that. That in there, and that. I thought we had resident owned communities somewhere, did we drop that at some point?
I don't think it's ever put in the language here.
That was in my, but it would be. An eligible use, right?
I don't know, maybe under the single family,
That's what I'm,
but I think we did talk about. Earlier that you did decide to change the language that it must be placed into a land trust to be secured.
no, did we get there? That's what the final question is that what we decided that you must?
At one point, the discussion
Okay.
was changing it to the city requires any such property placed into a land trust to be secured with a deed restriction
Okay,
or
any such
similar
property.
government.
Okay,
But it changed a couple times, so I wanna make sure we have clearly.
I like
I think
that.
this sentence there is
Yes,
kind of, I think it's redundant, yeah, I think we can just say place into community land trust and then strike the to be secured with a deed restriction or similar covenant that's implied, I think, just through the use of that tool. Yeah.
Okay,
And we're gonna say not a land trust, but a community.
all right. Good meeting. And did we settle on, we got,
Okay,
we
so
settle
I
on
have
the next meeting?
partial surveys, so Riley 9 or 16 is okay, John 9 is okay, but not 16, Michael not the 9th, but 16 is okay. Sarah, I think you said the 16th was okay, but are you okay staying with the 9th if we need it for Karen?
I can do both. Either work for me.
Okay, so then it comes down to you, because we need 4 of you, and one person can't do one, and one person can't do the other. Sorry, probably, so sorry. September 9th or September 16th? September 9th is our normal one, right? But one person is not able and has proposed the 16th instead.
Both are fine. Just to make things confusing.
I think probably keeping your regular schedule, and I'll miss that week.
Well, I was just gonna say the exact opposite, I thought it's probably more important for you to be able to be here at that meeting than for me to be able to be here at that meeting. So if you move it to the 16th and everybody else is happy, and I'm the only one who misses it.
Very good.
That's very good.
And I'm sorry, I'm saying you couldn't at all, or that you could virtually.
I think the likelihood of me being able to do it virtually is low, but
I'm sorry, I
not
couldn't remember
zero.
your, okay.
Well, we will have the virtual option in case you can join virtually.
Okay, so we're gonna move it to the 16th.
And
Okay.
that's cool.
Okay.
So,
You
but-
can-
that day.
Hmm?
We'll be busy that day, so.
Yeah.
There's an open house that night for zoning.
It'll be the same time.
But,
2 p.m.
you know, every time I go by,
Usually
I just
same
know
time.
how.
Same
Yeah,
time,
today is an hour.
Same time as it would have been on the night.
Whatever the road that
Well,
turn-
and we went
go out
an
to.
hour.
Sorry, I know some of that is like.
I just wanted to make sure I was like.
Like,
Okay,
it's gonna be
so-
beautiful, it's gonna be.
I thought you did.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And they're talking about.
Yeah. So for the sake of the meeting, are we
Let's make
adjourning
plans.
or
Yeah,
share?
let's let it plan, but.
Share.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
So for the sake of the meeting, are we adjourning
Oh,
or?
yes, thank you. No, we are taking public comments.
We have
Anyone
no
making
public,
public comment? No public
Ready?
comment?
we have no members of
Comments.
public online.
Alright, sorry, I won't say like that, but being no public, there will be no public comment. Member communication proposals for next agenda will be just to wrap up the work of the committee, and then the next meeting will be September 16th at 2:00, right?
Great.
And,
Move to adjourn.
move adjourned.
Second.
All right. All right.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you,
everybody.
Sarah.
That was intensive.
Alright.
Thank you, Sarah, for doing
Thank
this. for-
Sorry for having to run out on everyone.
You're fine.